This meeting of the Littleton Licensing Authority will come to order. Will the city clerk please call the roll?
Authority Member Bradish.
Here.
Authority Member Cole.
Here.
Authority Member Lavier.
Here.
Authority Member Mather.
Here.
Authority Member Odell.
Here.
Authority Member Peterson. Authority Member Webb.
Here.
We have a quorum. Next item of business is approval of the agenda.
I'll move that we approve the agenda.
A second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
No opposed, motion carried. First item, next item of business is the resumption of the hearing regarding, somebody trying to interrupt? Vasilio's Frangiskakis doing business as Old Mill Brewery, 5798 South Rapp Street. I think the city prosecutor is ready to continue on.
Before we start, Mr. Chairman, I have one item that I wanted to note for the record. The staff communication for this hearing, the regulation 47900A was the previous version of that regulation. It's been corrected and you've been given the correct version of that regulation. The correct verbiage was included during the probable cause hearing in that communication and in the letter that went to the licensee providing notice of the show cause hearing. So I just wanted to note that for the record.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, before we get started, I'd like to make a motion and then we can discuss with the authority. But I think because of the time that we spent last meeting with motions, which I think was somewhat disruptive to the flow. I think they're important that the attorneys have the ability to make those, but I think we could make the flow of the meeting better if perhaps we delegated authority to the chair to vote or to rule on those motions. So
The objections.
The objections. So I move that we delegate responsibility and authority to the chairperson for tonight's meeting to rule on any objections.
I second that.
And
Discussion?
I just wanted to add for discussion purposes that I trust Bill's judgment in making sure that everyone has a fair take, that we hear the right amount of information so that everyone feels like they've been heard fairly, but we also keep the process moving in the interest of everyone's time.
On the matter of discussion, Chairman Bradish has been superlative as a chair. I, as well, trust his judgment. However, no member of the authority up here has a law degree or has passed the bar. And there are things that can come up that cannot be anticipated an hour ahead of time, a day or 2 days at a time. So I would make what I'd like to see in that amendment, that motion, is also that the chairman, if he feels the necessity, can call upon the city attorney, and that the city attorney will render her best legal advice to the chair in order to make that decision.
That's certainly my intent, that in the motion to vest the authority in the chairman, that he is able to make those or ask any of those questions that he sees fit. So I don't think it's restrictive of him doing that.
I think it's implicit in the way we operate anyway, to ask for advice from the city attorney. So that doesn't really modify the motion. Any other discussion? City Clerk, would you poll the authority, please?
Chairperson Bradish.
Yes.
Vice Chair Cole.
Yes.
Authority Member Lavier.
Yes.
Authority Member Mather.
Yes.
Authority Member Odell.
Yes.
City Prosecutor, are you ready to resume?
I am. I just wanted to confirm that all the city witnesses, which just will be Corporal Farmer, are sequestered outside. I wish to ask the licensee if his witnesses are. Thank you.
We're up to Exhibit L now, aren't we? Didn't we have an additional exhibit Last time that is not in our handout.
We had the 911
We
tape.
go as
which-
far as Exhibit K.
The 911 tape that we listened to was Exhibit L.
Okay.
City calls Corporal Farmer.
Good evening, Corporal.
Evening.
Would you state your name, please?
Corporal Jeff Farmer?
You're employed by the city of Littleton.
Correct.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give before this authority is truthful?
I do.
Thank you.
Spell your last name for the record.
Farmer.
Thank you. Did you respond to the incident at Old Mill on November 5th, 2014, approximately 9:49 p.m.?
I did.
And you're a corporal with the
Yes,
police
I am.
department? How long have you been employed with the police department?
9 years.
When you responded, what did you encounter?
As I exited my patrol vehicle, I heard Sergeant Dimitrik advise that they had two people at gunpoint. So I ran to the east side of the rear parking lot of the Old Mill. Saw two people prone out on the ground. Prone out on the ground just means they're laying on the ground. A couple officers had them at gunpoint. At this point, we didn't know who had a gun. Dispatch had already advised that there was possibly a gun involved in the disturbance. So ran up, helped Officer Carnes take the two males into custody. They were placed in handcuffs. Both parties were searched. Neither one of them had a weapon on them of any kind.
Okay. What did you do next?
Once they were searched, one of the males, I'm not sure which one, father or son, advised that the person with the gun was inside the restaurant. I didn't know if it was true or not at that point, so walked inside to assist whoever was inside. As I walked up the stairs into the entrance area, noticed that two magazine stands were knocked over on the ground. There was a baseball cap lying on the ground. I entered the restaurant and saw Corporal Carlson talking with Peter right at the entrance to the kitchen area.
Okay. And when they were talking to one another, how would you describe Peter's demeanor?
He was very angry and agitated. I came in at the very end of the conversation.
And what was the tone of voice?
Very loud, at a point of yelling at each other. Corporal Carlson and then gave Peter a lawful order to have a seat in the chair.
And what happened?
At that point, he stated, "Fuck you." So Corporal Carlson grabbed his arm. Peter then pulled his arm away in a resisting manner, at which point Corporal Carlson grabbed him again, pushed him over to the table. At this point, I start running over to their location. Still don't know if Peter has a gun, who has a gun, because like I said, I came into the conversation late.
And when Corporal Carlson grabbed his arm and started to push him towards the table, how did Peter react?
Started fighting. The fight was on. They got over the table. They kind of knocked the table halfway over. At that point, Peter then grabbed Corporal Carlson in more of like a football manner, starts pushing him towards the patio door on the west side of the bar, at which point he then grabs both legs, does what he admitted to later on as a double leg takedown, took Corporal Carlson to the ground in a very aggressive manner, hopped on top of him in what's called the mount position, the absolute worst fighting position on the ground for the person on the bottom to be in, at which point then I was able to run up to them, catch up to them.
Okay.
Engage.
When you indicated grabbed in a football manner, how would you further describe that?
I would just describe that after they hit the table, he grabbed his arms around Corporal Carlson, started pushing him.
Kind of like he was going to tackle him?
Exactly.
You indicated he grabbed him in the football manner. Was that what portion of Corporal Carlson's body was that?
Around his I would say from his waist to his chest in that kind of area.
And then he moved down lower to the legs?
Yes, well, as they're going west through the bars, he's like pushing Corporal Carlson backward. He lowered his hands to right above the thigh area, picked him up, and took him to the ground in a very aggressive manner.
And when you say picked him up, did Corporal Carlson actually leave the ground?
I wouldn't say like picked him up and carried him, but was able to get both feet off the ground and made Corporal Carlson fall on his back.
After Corporal Carlson falls on his back, that's when Peter hops on him?
Yes, is on top of him in the mount position.
Okay, and what happens next?
Corporal Carlson still had one arm of Peter's kind of locked up and also almost in a headlock, just kind of holding on at that point. Peter had his, what would be his right arm free and was striking Corporal Carlson, appeared to, actively be fighting him when he was on top of him.
And when you say striking Corporal Carlson, how was he striking him?
As I'm running up, it appeared that he's punching him in the side, striking him in any way he can while in the headlock.
How many times do you think that Peter struck Corporal Carlson?
I honestly can't recall on that.
You're running up, and this is going on as you're approaching?
Yes.
And when you get right next to them, what do you do?
They're on the ground, so then I go down to my knees, conduct a knee strike to Peter's right common peroneal area, technique that we teach officers all the time as a defensive tactics technique to try and help control people.
So in layman's term, you take your knee.
Knee strike to the Peter's right quad area.
Okay. So you're on your knees. You, from a kneeling position, take your knee.
Yeah, grab Peter by the back, knee strike him, like I said, in the right quad area.
Okay, so your arms are behind him, and you're pulling him forward as your knee is coming up towards his thigh?
Yes.
And did that have an effect?
No effect at all.
And when you say that's a common move, what do you mean by that?
It's a move that typically works pretty well, creates motor dysfunction in the person's leg. Usually they'll stop resisting once a knee strike is done. A lot of times it's done more often because it doesn't cause great injury to the person, maybe just a bruise, something along those lines, but not to the point of breaking bones, cutting somebody's face or anything along those lines.
So you indicated that in teaching of defensive tactics, do you teach defensive tactics?
Yes, I am one of the department's defensive tactics instructor.
Do you know what the force continuum is?
Yeah, the use of force continuum, of course.
Okay. And where would a knee strike be in that use of force?
Hard empty hand is what we call it.
And what does that mean?
It just means it's a strike delivered by a police officer without any type of weapon, being a baton, a sap, anything along those lines.
Okay. And where is that in the spectrum? Is it on either end?
It's right in the middle, below intermediate weapons, but above soft empty hand.
After you did that, what happened?
When that had little to no effect, I then started delivering hammer fist strikes to Peter's back area. I would say somewhere along the lines of lower shoulder blades on his right-hand side.
Are you talking at this time?
Yes, I'm telling him multiple times to stop resisting, get off of Corporal Carlson, stop fighting.
And during this time, how is Peter responding?
Just still actively aggressive, fighting, doing everything he can to,
Was he still punching Corporal Carlson?
Once I started delivering the strikes, he stopped.
The hammer strikes?
Or the hammer fist strikes,
okay.
Yes, to his back area. He pretty much disengaged from Corporal Carlson. At that point, he turned towards me in a manner to engage me. Then in the fight, at that point, I then delivered a straight punch, or just in layman's term, a punch to Peter, right above his, what would be his left eye area.
Okay, when you said he turned to engage you, did he stand up? Was he still?
No, we're still both on our knees, but instead of being over Corporal Carlson on pretty much all fours, he sits back up, starting to turn towards me in a manner to engage myself. Because
is he still mounted on?
Yes,
Corporal Carlson?
but turning towards me.
So his hips and body is turning towards you.
That's correct.
Okay, and when he turned towards you, was he saying anything at this point?
I don't recall him saying anything.
Okay, and how would you describe his demeanor and his affect at that point?
Belligerent, out of control, aggressively fighting. Two police officers that are giving him lawful commands to stop fighting, stop resisting.
When he turned to engage you, was he doing anything with his hands or his body?
No, I don't recall. I just remember him turning to engage me, at which point I thought, the fight was him and I were going to start on a fist fight or whatever.
And that's when you
Punched him
in the
Yep.
face?
Just knocked him back off of Corporal Carlson,
And where did you punch him? You said face, but where specifically?
right above the left eye.
And that knocked him off Corporal Carlson?
Correct.
And where would punching be in the...
Hard empty hand.
Hard empty
Yep,
hand?
still hard empty hand.
So similar to a knee strike?
Correct. Same exact level on the use of force continuum.
At that point, why not just, try to grab him and...
At that point, my goal was to end the fight. Do everything I could to stop the fight, so less chance of officers getting injured, less chances of him being injured, just have everything ended.
Okay. So he gets knocked off Carlson. What happens next?
Corporal Carlson calls for help on his radio. He's able to scoot away from him, Peter, get some distance. He then draws out his taser, tased Peter in the lower back area.
And during this time, what is Peter doing?
Of being tased?
Right before he was tased. So you knock him back off Corporal Carlson. Carlson moves away. What is going on between you and Peter?
At that point, he had fallen back, kind of maybe a foot or two away from me. We had almost disengaged at that point once he had fallen back.
All right. Carlson, did he say anything about, we're going to tase you?
Yeah, he pulled out his taser, announced that he was going to tase him 3 times, then tased him in the back, and then took the taser and then placed it on his hamstring area to do a drive stun to increase the distance and effectiveness of the taser.
And during that time, what was going on?
We were waiting until the taser was done, and then placed Peter into custody. A few seconds after the taser was completed, multiple officers had run into the bar, and we were able to take him into custody without any more incident.
Why would you tase someone in a situation like this?
Just his out-of-control, aggressive manner. Corporal Carlson believed that the fight was still going to continue. He wanted to end it, so that's why he would have tased him.
And where is the use of taser in the force continuum?
Step up from hard empty hand and intermediate weapons.
Once Peter was placed in custody, what happened?
He was walked out of the bar. The entire time that we're walking out of the bar, he's just yelling at us that we're trying to extort money out of him and just yelling at us, all kinds of things. I don't even recall everything that he was saying. He was walked out to our patrol cars, which were out on South Rapp Street. At that point, he was searched, placed in the back of a patrol vehicle.
Whose vehicle?
It was my patrol vehicle.
Had his demeanor changed once you got him in cuffs as you moved him out of the bar?
Yeah, I believe the longer that he was in cuffs, he became more and more, even more agitated. Just absolutely out of control is how I would describe it.
How was he behaving in your patrol vehicle?
hitting windows, kicking the divider, just out of control.
When you say hitting windows with his hands?
No, it'd be his head or his feet.
Head, feet, kicking windows, doors in the divider?
Correct.
When he was in the car, could you hear him at all?
Yeah, he's yelling, screaming. I don't recall exactly what he was saying, but just, you could tell he's inside the vehicle yelling and still out of control.
Did he make any threats to anybody that was involved?
A little later on, when the paramedics arrived on scene, that he made a statement that if he had his guns, he would kill all of us.
And where was he when he made that threat?
He was on the ground being assessed by the paramedics.
So they were actually rendering aid to him?
Correct. I think it was right around the point of removing the taser probes, checking out the injuries that he had sustained.
Once Peter went into your vehicle, did you continue dealing with Peter?
No, once he started becoming really aggressive in the car, kicking windows and that kind of stuff, Commander Iman then walked up to the car, opened the door, tried calming Peter down, talking with him. So at that point, Commander Iman then advised Corporal Carlson and myself just to kind of step back, walk away, because he didn't want Peter to be able to see us, and since we'd just been in a fight with him, and have him try to, escalate even more.
Now, at some point, Vasilios, and I think you may know him as Bill, appeared on scene.
Correct, yeah, he appeared in his personal vehicle.
Do you know him?
No, I don't know him. That night was the first night I had ever met him.
Okay, and how was he acting when he arrived on scene?
When he arrived on scene, he was very agitated at the police, very mad at us.
Your opinion, was his behavior consistent with a professional bar owner?
No, not in any way.
Did Peter make any statements regarding his position or ownership with Old Mill?
Yeah, that it was his bar. He's the manager. It's his place.
And when were those statements made?
When we were walking him out of the bar, when he's telling us that we're just trying to extort money out of him, he's the owner, it's his bar.
And that behavior that Peter, the entire evening, including his statements when you were walking him out of the bar in handcuffs, in your opinion, would that behavior be consistent with someone who's a manager or possibly participating in the ownership of the bar?
No. And I would go as far as saying in my 9 years, he's probably in the top 5 most belligerent people I've ever dealt with on a call. And I've worked graveyards my entire career. All I ever deal with is drunks and people on drugs. And going to the point of saying that he, probably at least in the top 5 most out of control people I've ever dealt with, saying he's reached a pretty high level.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Corporal Farmer, when you got to the Old Mill Brewery that night, there was 2 people on the ground at gunpoint, correct?
Correct, sir.
And one of those people said that the guy with the gun is inside, right?
That's what I was told.
Which one?
I like I said to Ms. McCarthy, I don't remember which one of the 2 people had advised that. Like I said, we had just gotten them in custody, searched them. Neither one of them had weapons on them. One of them said that the person with the gun is inside. So that's when I went inside to assist whoever was inside. I didn't even know who was inside at the moment.
Okay. So you were told that the person, one of those people, but you're not sure who, said the guy with the gun is inside?
Correct.
Okay. So now you're going inside. If you thought they had a weapon, why not have a cover officer with you?
Because I knew officers were already inside. I didn't know who or how many.
Okay.
But I was
Oh,
just
you weren't the
walking.
first one in?
Well, I'm sorry, what?
You're not the first one in?
No, I was not the first one. I knew, but like I said, I knew there were officers inside the bar.
And if you thought that someone inside had a weapon, why didn't you draw your weapon?
Because officers are already inside dealing with them.
So you didn't
I
know.
mean, when I run up to them, or to the two people on the ground, at that point I knew people had gone inside.
Okay.
So, I mean, a minute later, 2 minutes later, I felt they probably had the situation under control, so don't need to walk in, gun out.
You weren't the first one in, and you carry a taser, right?
I do. I'm also a taser instructor.
Okay. And you said at some point that Corporal Carlson had Peter's arm. At what point did Peter get his arm away from Corporal Carlson?
As I walked in, they were standing right in the doorway of the kitchen. Corporal Carlson had told him to come have a seat, given him a lawful order to have a seat in the chair, at which time he states, "Fuck you." And Corporal Carlson then grabs his arm. He pulls his arm away, as in starting to resist, starting to disobey a lawful order. Starts to, attempt to walk back away into the kitchen. That's when Corporal Carlson grabbed him, pushed him over towards the table area.
Earlier you said that you didn't get there until the sort of end of the
Yes,
the argument.
that was the very end of the...
So you didn't see what happened before that or hear what happened
No,
before
I
that?
did not.
Okay. Any other commands given to Peter by you?
Just as the fight's starting to take place and I guess escalate, just stop resisting, stop fighting. It's pretty much the common terms that we teach officers to say when a...
Well, I'm just asking about that night. Did you give Peter any other orders?
I did not know.
Did Corporal Carlson in your presence?
Other than stop resisting, stop fighting, no.
And at what point did you realize that Peter didn't have a weapon?
Once he was taken into custody and he was searched, I was...
And it was only after Peter was tased did the third officer come in, correct?
Several officers ran in after, yes.
Okay. That was after the...
After he'd been tased, correct.
You actually spoke to one of the gentlemen that was on the ground outside in the Broncos, the one in the Broncos sweatshirt, and he told you that he broke his hand, quote, trying to pull Peter off his son, right?
No, at no time did he ever tell me that. If you'd read in my report, it says that broke his hand when he punched him.
Okay. So, was Officer Lynch also there then?
She possibly could have been.
Well, there's a report here that I'm reading that says that the guy in the Broncos sweatshirt said he was broke his hand trying to pull Peter off his son. Is that not your understanding of what?
Not a report I wrote, so I can't testify to it.
Okay, fair enough.
What Robert told me was he broke his hand when he punched Peter in the head.
Right, so he had admitted to punching Peter in the head, correct?
Yes.
And he admitted to saying that he was going to pull a gun on Peter, pretended to pull a gun on Peter.
Yes.
And the younger patron also said that he had been punching Peter.
Trying to recall. I don't believe the son ever said he was punching Peter, that he had been punched by Peter. He did tell me that he had put Peter in a chokehold.
He said he put him in a chokehold.
Yes,
And the older gentleman,
when Peter's fighting with his dad.
and the older gentleman also said he tried to put Peter in a chokehold.
That he tried to?
Yes.
I don't recall on that one.
When you got in there was also a woman inside, right?
Yes, there was. There was a female standing at the, what I would call the hostess station.
Their name Katie Cashman.
I'm
You
not
don't remember?
100% sure.
That's fair enough. Well, let's back up. When this incident happened, there was no other patrons at the bar, correct?
No, there were no other customers.
The whole time you were there was no one besides law enforcement and staff, correct?
And, yep.
And when you walked in, Katie Cashman was yelling that Peter wasn't resisting and wasn't doing anything wrong, right?
I don't recall her yelling that.
I don't recall. Well, what was she saying?
I don't recall anything she was saying.
Okay.
I was target locked on Peter fighting with another police officer. That's what I was focused on, not what somebody else is saying. I'm focused on that incident that's taking place when
But
Peter's actively assaulting an officer.
She was right there, so she saw the whole thing. Is that fair to
Yeah,
say?
I would definitely say she did.
But you didn't hear anything she was
No,
saying?
like I said, I was target locked on Peter assaulting another police officer.
And at some point, you actually, you witnessed Mr. Franginkakis, Vasilio Franginkakis, arrive at the scene?
Correct.
So he was not there during the incident itself?
No, he was not at any time.
And you actually talked to him,
I did.
calmed him down?
There was a group of officers. I wouldn't say I calmed him down, but he did calm down.
Okay.
At which point I then asked him if we could get a copy of the video surveillance tape, because there was a camera that would have caught everything perfectly. At which point he told me that the camera system was not functioning, so he couldn't give us a copy.
But he was cooperative, right?
Yeah, once he'd calmed down, yes.
He didn't do anything to obstruct your investigation or anything else like that, correct?
I mean, not obstruct it, but he did impede it when he's there and he's irritated and he's yelling at us about what took place with Peter. I mean,
Well, he wasn't
when we're
happy.
having to spend time to calm him down, I mean, it is kind of impeding an investigation, yes.
Well, the incident was over, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, of course he's upset, but he didn't know what was going on.
Well,
He
I
just
wouldn't say
got there, right?
actually, I wouldn't even say the incident's over. Peter wasn't even in the back of the ambulance. He's still being attended to by the police, or by police and fire. He's belligerently out of control. At which point he arrives on scene, and then he's agitated, which then pulls police officers and supervisors away from Peter to deal with him, calm him down.
Well, at this point, there's a lot of officers on scene.
There are a lot of
And
officers.
Peter's in handcuffs.
Yes,
You
and
just
still
been beat
absolutely
up
out of control.
But he's been beat up and tased, and he's in handcuffs, correct?
He was beat up because he assaulted a police officer.
I didn't ask you why he was beat up.
Well,
You
I'm
beat him
telling
up. You just testified you punched him in the face
I
yourself,
did.
correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
because he's actively assaulting a police
I
officer.
didn't ask you why, sir. Just answer my
I'm still
questions,
telling you.
please.
At this point, I'm going to object. You need to let the witness answer.
I'm asking him to only answer my questions as well. He wants to say what he wants to say. That's not how this works.
Proceed.
So you never interviewed Ms. Cashman personally?
No, I did not personally interview her.
And did you ever interview Jonathan Cavalier?
No, I did not.
And that was the end. So once Peter was in handcuffs, that was the end of your involvement in the case?
Other than interviewing Robert, that was the end.
You interviewed Robert.
So here's what took place. Officer Gordon first interviewed him and wrote down his entire statement on a statement form because Robert was unable to write due to his broken hand,
Correct.
which was, by even looking at it, was obviously broken. So Officer Gordon wrote out his entire report, and then I had Robert just tell me briefly what had happened so that I had a clear understanding of everything that took place.
And Officer Lynch wasn't there when you interviewed Robert?
I don't recall what officers were there at the time. I'm talking with Robert, and me and him are engaged in a conversation just like we are. I wasn't paying attention to other officers. I mean, she could have been there.
Did you watch any
Might have
other
interviewed him
officers
before.
interview Robert?
I'm sorry, what?
Did you witness any other officers interview Robert?
Other than Officer Gordon, I didn't. Officer Lynch might have at a different point when I wasn't standing there.
I don't have any further questions.
I have a couple more. Let's go back to when you arrive.
Okay.
Do you have any idea what's going on?
I have no idea who has a gun, I have no idea of anything other than there's two guys that are prone out on the ground. We take them into custody. One of them says the other person has a gun inside. I don't know.
Where are you getting information from before you even arrive on scene?
Our dispatchers.
Okay, so you're getting information from your dispatchers who are getting it from unknown people.
Yes.
All right. So when you arrive on scene, you have no idea what's going on.
Nope.
What is the goal when you arrive on scene? And something similar to this, where you have reports of a gun, you have reports of people fighting, and that's about all the information you have.
Find everybody that's involved in the fight, at least take them into custody for the moment for officer safety, find out who has the gun so that nobody else, is possibly shot, injured.
Okay. Is it important to you to not let witnesses leave? Or...
Yeah, nobody's leaving at that point. Everybody's staying. Nobody's allowed to leave. Everybody's being detained.
Okay. And how is information being communicated from officer to officer?
Just once somebody interviews.
I'm talking about right when you arrive on scene?
Over the radios.
Okay. And how would you describe the radio communication?
Very amped up. Very
amped
intense
up.
Because somebody possibly has a gun. We don't know who. Dispatch never told us who has a gun, just that there was a fight. One of the parties had a gun.
And in this particular situation, I believe there were about 10 officers that arrived on scene?
Yeah, I would bet so, yeah.
So you have 10 different officers attempting to communicate via radio?
Correct.
Arriving at different times?
Yes.
And the information is limited, would you agree?
Yeah, you try to limit your the amount of stuff you put on the radio in case, like at the time when Corporal Carlson called for help, in case somebody does need help or needs to say something on the radio, you don't want to just chew up all the airtime.
Okay. So would you describe, would this be similar to entering a room blindfolded?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
No further questions.
At the time that you jumped into the fight between Carlson and Peter, were you assured at that time there was not a gun involved?
At that time, I still did not know. I didn't know. When I walked in, I didn't know if Peter was the only person inside the bar that was in the fight. I didn't know how many people were in the fight. So Officer Carlson is engaged with him. Their fight breaks out. He takes him to the ground. At that point, I still don't know if Peter has a gun on him or not.
Is that procedure when there's a possibility there's a weapon involved that you just jump into the fight, or is there something else?
Well, it doesn't matter about a gun. If somebody's assaulting a police officer, of course, it is procedure to help that officer, stop the altercation, stop the fight. So, that could be on any call. It doesn't matter whether it's a gun or not. If somebody's assaulting a police officer, it has to be ended right then.
Thank you.
Corporal Farmer, some questions about Peter's demeanor. At the time you were walking him in the car, you said he had made some statements about he was the bar owner, he was the manager. Can you elaborate on those, please?
He always said that it was his bar. It's his bar. We're just trying to extort money from him. Just yelling at us the entire time we're walking him out of the bar about things along those lines. I don't remember every exact statement, but...
Had you had prior police interaction with Mr. Frankas?
Oh, that was the first time I have ever had interaction with Peter.
Okay. And had you had prior interaction with his father?
No, I have not.
Okay. And recount for us how Mr. Frankakakis defined himself as he arrived on the scene. Did he identify himself as the bar owner?
Yes, he did.
What was specifically what he said?
I don't recall exact statements, just that that this was his bar, he's the bar owner.
Okay. Did he express concern for Peter's well-being?
I don't recall him ever expressing anything for his well-being, just that he was irritated at us for what had happened, even though he didn't know anything about the situation.
Do you happen to know how he got there? Who called him?
I do not. I just know he arrived in his personal vehicle.
I have no further questions.
You had been around Peter for quite a bit of time that evening?
Are you talking about at the end of the night, or?
The whole time you were there. You had a lot of interaction with him.
Yes, I did.
Would you say he was intoxicated?
Oh, he was very intoxicated. When we were walking him out of the bar, we could smell a very strong odor of alcohol in his breath. His speech was slurred.
Okay, thank you.
Did you administer a PBT, or are you aware of any officers that did administer a PBT?
No, he refused to take one. Just in his belligerent state, he wouldn't take one.
Any more questions?
No more.
Thank you, Corporal.
Thank you.
The city rests. The city would ask if Officer or Corporal Farmer could be released. He would like to observe the remaining portion of the proceedings.
Would you repeat that, please?
I rest, so I don't have any additional evidence. Corporal Farmer would like to remain inside, so I'm asking if you'll release him from his subpoena as it pertains to any additional testimony.
Very well.
I would object to that. There's still an order of sequestration and the hearing's not over. So he'd be subject to recall.
Your objection's noted, sir. Are you ready to present your case?
I am. My objection's noted. Is it ruled upon? We have an order of sequestration. He's a witness. So, I mean, under the current order.
Are you going to sequester your witnesses? Is that what you mean?
My witnesses are, all witnesses are sequestered.
You made them sequester theirs.
And I sequestered mine.
Okay.
So that's why I'm asking if he's sequestered that he not be in here while I call my witnesses.
Chairman Bradish, we just need a ruling whether Corporal Farmer can stay or you'd like him to leave.
I don't have a problem with Corporal Farmer being sequestered. He's been sequestered for 2 nights now. Would you mind?
Well, then he needs to leave.
And I would call Jonathan Cavalier.
Would you state your name, please?
Jonathan Cavalier.
Spell your last name.
Cavalier.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give before this authority is truthful?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Cavalier, where do you work?
At the Old Mill Brewery.
What do you do?
I'm a cook.
How long have you been working there?
It's been about a year and 2 months.
Okay. And do you know Peter Franginkakis?
Yes.
Were you working on the night of November 5th, 2014?
Yes.
Did you witness any interaction between Peter and some patrons there?
Yeah. Most of what I have to tell is basically what I heard. I was in the kitchen the whole time.
What did you hear?
Basically, he started yelling at, I know her as Becca, because she had walked away from him for some reason after asking him something, and he started yelling at her, and I was in the kitchen, and I saw at some point 2 customers just thought it wasn't right that he was yelling at her the way he was, and they decided to interfere. I didn't see much of it. I just heard more yelling, and at one point I heard Peter yell that one of the men had a gun, and I didn't see anything, but I heard that he had yelled that, and I kind of saw it. I can see a little bit of the front of the restaurant from the kitchen, but not too much. And from where I was standing, I could see him trying to push the 2 customers towards the door, the front door, to remove them from the restaurant. And after that, they kind of got to the front door, and I from a different part of the kitchen, I could see him pushing them out the front door. And at that point, Katie had told me that...
Cashman?
Yes. She had told me to go outside and get Peter inside and just kind of de-escalate the situation. And so I ran from the back door of the kitchen around the building, and when I approached the front of the restaurant, Peter was facing away from the restaurant, and the men were facing towards the restaurant, towards him. And I could see the older gentleman with his hand in his waistband behind his, just like this, and Peter was yelling, "He has a gun, he has a gun." And the the two customers started walking away from the restaurant to leave, and I put my arm around Peter and started pulling him inside. And by the time we got inside, the police were arriving out front, and I went back to the kitchen again. And at that point, we went outside to the parking lot, and that's when the police were asking for police reports, and we wrote our police reports at that point.
So let me break that down a little bit. You didn't see the initial altercation between Peter and the customers?
No, I didn't see a full. I just saw from where I was, I saw just him kind of pushing them and just some yelling. I wasn't able to see from where I was everything that happened.
But you heard Peter asking him to leave?
Yeah, he was saying, "You need to go. You need to get out," and things along that line. And then I saw him kind of pushing them towards the front of the restaurant.
Okay. And then did you see? What's the next thing you saw?
I couldn't see at that point. I was still in the back of the restaurant, just kind of staying away from the altercation, but from the area I was, again, I could see in a different part the front door and him pushing him out the front door.
And then you went out the back and around, right, to the parking lot?
Yes, from the back of the restaurant through the parking lot to the outside of the front of the building.
And when you got to the front, you saw the older gentleman sort of reaching into his back waistband of his pants, pretending to pull out a gun?
He wasn't. He more of had it placed in his waistband and was holding his hand there, and he wasn't pulling it out. And he was facing. He had his front to Peter, so he couldn't see behind him. But he just kept it in there the whole time. And I just remember him still having his hand in there when I was kind of reaching around Peter to pull him inside the front door, and that's when we went inside.
But he was putting his hand there like as if he had a gun there.
Yeah, he was definitely holding it there and not showing him what was in his hand.
And then you didn't see what happened after that?
No, after that, I was in the parking lot giving a statement, and I saw a few police officers run inside from the front of the restaurant, but I was outside. I did see the two patrons or the customers go. They went on the ground from the police. The police had them at gunpoint and kind of got them on the ground, and then they started talking to them, and I was just in the parking lot for the remainder of that time.
Did you hear one of those individuals say the guy with the gun is inside?
I did not hear that, no.
No further questions.
So you're a cook?
Yes.
And you worked with the Old Mill for a year and 2 months?
Yes.
And you continue to work with the Old Mill?
Yes.
You indicated you were in the kitchen the whole time. Was the first time your attention was drawn to this was when Peter was yelling at Becca?
Yes, he started yelling at her, and I knew who he was yelling at, and I didn't see too much of it.
Didn't know who he was yelling
at?
Oh,
I did know who he was yelling at, but I didn't I just kind of stayed where I was to not intervene.
And he was screaming at Becca, correct?
Yeah, he was pretty verbal.
He was loud enough that everyone in the restaurant could hear him.
Yeah, it was really we had employees and then those two customers. There were the remainder of the customers that we had that night.
Peter had been drinking that night, correct?
Yeah, by the end of the night, I believe he had a shot or two. I don't know the amount. I knew he was at that point in time.
And he was intoxicated, correct?
I wouldn't say he was intoxicated. I believe he had a few drinks, though.
Peter was not acting professionally, was he?
He was definitely way too loud and saying a lot of obscenities that he didn't need to. But at no point did I think he was, overstepping his bounds. I don't know the whole reason why he was mad at her, but he didn't finish yelling at her by the time the customers had interfered. And when that happened, I believe he was in all right of getting them out because he was doing his job.
Okay, so he's screaming at Becca, who works there, correct?
Yeah, she worked there.
He's yelling obscenities. What kind of obscenities is he yelling?
It was mainly just cuss words, just in between here and there.
Okay,
it wasn't.
Let's talk about him. What kind of cuss words?
To be able to answer the question before the prosecutor interrupts.
What kind of cuss words?
He was using fuck. He was using that a lot. It was There was just a lot of words thrown around. I couldn't remember exactly everything that was said. It was more of he was trying to say that I'm your manager. You're below me. You're not as, like, you don't have, I don't know how to organize this. It's just, like I said, it was just kind of just, he was just throwing obscenities in his comments. It wasn't, he wasn't really name calling really that I thought of. He was just kind of, he was yelling and just using a lot of words.
And these type of statements made to Rebecca, the way he was delivering them, the screaming, the obscenities, you didn't think he was overstepping his bounds? I
don't think it's right to yell at someone the way he did, but I don't know how to answer that question, honestly.
Would it be fair to say that a boss should not treat an employee like that?
I could say a boss shouldn't, yell the way he was doing. I don't think he was treating her unfairly. I think he was just kind of just using a lot of mean words just to kind of get his point across, really, and that was kind of just how he dealt with it.
And the two customers that were still in the bar, did you have any idea where they were at this point?
I knew there was customers. They were somewhere near the bar. I'm not exactly sure. I didn't see where they were seated.
And how many other employees were in the bar?
I think it was Katie and Peter at that point. I don't remember. And Becca was on, but I don't.
Cassandra Campbell was there, correct?
Yeah, Cassie was there in the kitchen. She also worked as a cook when she was working there.
Now, you indicated that you heard Peter say 2 times the man had a gun?
Yes, one time after I heard him yelling with the two customers, I couldn't really see what was going on, but I heard them yelling. And then he yelled that he has a gun, and then everything after that, I couldn't really hear what the yelling was about. I just kind of saw him pushing people out, and then again, when I left the restaurant from the outside and came around front, the first thing Peter yelled was, "He's got a gun," and then the guy had his hand in his at the back of his waistband.
Okay. Now, you missed the entire physical altercation between Peter and the two gentlemen, Robert and Joshua?
Yes, I did.
You were inside the kitchen at that point?
Yes.
You wrote a statement, correct?
Yes, I did.
And in your statement, you only make reference to Peter yelling he had a gun one time, and that was when Peter was outside.
Mm-hmm. I honestly didn't piece together that statement very well. I didn't think that it would be needed in any sort of case or anything like that, and I just kind of wrote everything down really quickly.
Okay. Would it surprise you that this entire incident was caught on 911?
It wouldn't surprise me, no, I did.
And would it surprise you that the only time that the person had threatened that he had a gun was when they were outside?
The relevance of whether or not he was surprised about something.
Well, I mean,
go ahead with the question. We'll hear the answer.
The police probably weren't called until after the altercation had started, and I think it must have been before. He must have said that beforehand of the police call, but I couldn't tell you for sure.
The police call started when Robert White called the police inside the restaurant before him and Peter even started to get into a verbal altercation.
And again, I'm unaware of that. I wasn't able to see.
So it's your contention today that Peter said within the restaurant that he had a gun.
Yes, I did hear that. I didn't put on the statement.
And he said it outside the restaurant.
Yes.
And it's not in your written statement, the statement Peter made inside the restaurant.
No.
Peter is an owner, correct?
An owner? No, he's not.
Does he act like an owner?
Relevance?
He doesn't have any sort of authority. I mean, he's a manager, but even when he's on duty, there's someone above him, as far as I'm aware. He never acts really like an owner. He's just he's an employee as well as everyone else.
How many times did you talk about your testimony with your boss, Vasilios?
We didn't talk very much about it at all. I mean, he kind of asked me for what happened that night, and we kind of left it until this all started happening.
Okay, so you talked about it that night and you haven't talked about it since?
No, we haven't been talking about it. We've all kind of just kept it quiet because no one really needs to. I mean, there's more employees that aren't a part of this, and it just doesn't need to be mentioned.
And how many times did you talk about it with the attorney that's representing Vasilios?
It was just recently with the first court date, I believe, or the date that we came here. He asked me a few questions about what had happened that night also.
Okay. How many times have you heard Peter saying that he's the king in the old mill?
I've never heard that.
And that he's the boss?
I've never heard that also.
And when Peter is there, you indicated that there's normally someone above him. Who was above him that night?
That was Katie. She's usually in charge when they're working, and he's never really had. I mean, at the end of the night, someone else is closing, and someone else has the higher authority.
Okay, so it's your contention that Katie was the manager that evening?
Yes.
But Peter was acting as the manager.
Well, they both have a managerial status, but Katie was in charge of everyone that night.
They're both managers. I guess I don't really understand that.
We have a few managers at the bar. I mean, that work here and there, and sometimes they work together.
Okay. So from Peter's actions that night, I mean, I think it would be fair to assume that he was also in charge since he was reprimanding an employee.
Yes, yes.
You and Peter friends?
We talk at work, and I've never really hung out with him on a personal level.
Okay. Are you concerned about testifying tonight and your future employment with the old mill?
No.
No?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
No further questions.
Mr. Cavalier, a couple of things for clarification. Have you heard Peter yell at other employees previous to this occasion?
There was one incident, I mean, it was probably within eight months ago. I don't remember who it was. She doesn't work there anymore, but it was another incident.
Had he had previous interaction earlier that evening with Becca? Was he dissatisfied with her performance or something she had done?
I don't think so. He hadn't mentioned anything. I didn't notice any of that at all.
Have you on previous occasions seen Peter intoxicated in the old mill?
I mean, at the end of the night after he's done working, I've seen him drink a little bit.
What's a little bit?
I honestly couldn't tell you. I work in the kitchen. I don't really see what's going on at the bar very often. I kind of stay in the kitchen the whole time.
As this was unfolding, did it occur to you to call 911?
No, I didn't see. No, I heard. I just heard the yelling initially with Becca, and then I heard more yelling, but I didn't know exactly what was going on until after everything had taken place.
Wouldn't you be alarmed if you heard the word gun in a public place? Wouldn't you want to call 911?
Yes, but I didn't want. I didn't know what was going on, and I kind of stayed where I was in the kitchen. And then, I mean, after we had found out that when I saw him, I saw his hand in his waistband. I figured there was no gun. It looked like as if he was kind of just trying to say that to kind of scare people. But at that part, I wasn't alarmed. I just kind of I didn't think of anything else other than that.
Tell us a little bit more about Peter's demeanor that night. Was he in control?
Oh yeah, for the whole night. I mean, he was happy. He was doing what he needed to. I mean, he had just got off work. He had finished by about 8:30 or 9, and I was finishing closing the kitchen, and everything seemed pretty much intact.
How about at the time he was interacting with these two customers? Was he in control then?
Again, since I didn't see everything, I couldn't tell you fully, but I mean, from what I saw, it looked as if he was trying to push them out of the restaurant, get them out of the restaurant, and that was just kind of what my intention was from seeing what I saw.
Okay, help me here. Was he loud?
He was loud, yes.
Was he angry?
He seemed angry, yes.
Was he agitated?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can you tell me which hand Robert had in his waistband?
I believe it was his right hand.
Can someone refresh my memory on which hand he broke?
It's in Corporal Farmer's report on page 3, the right hand.
Okay, so it was his right hand he broke, and his right hand was in his waistband
Yes, it was
Kind of resting it there?
yeah, he was holding it there and kind of as if me and you were facing each other. He wasn't turning. He was just kind of like this.
Okay. Now, we had been told earlier that, and I'm still kind of fuzzy on whether Peter was the manager that night or he wasn't the manager that night. You're saying Katie was the manager on duty.
Well, they both have a managerial status, but I mean, Katie is normally in charge of everyone, no matter what. She was kind of the higher up in that situation.
Okay. So Peter was not on duty that night?
Well, he had just gotten off. We were just closing down. The restaurant was closed, and the two customers were in there after we closed the kitchen, and we were just kind of getting ready to shut everything down.
Okay. But he was telling Becca, "I'm your manager."
Yes.
And then we'd also been told that evening Peter was giving free shots to everyone in the restaurant, including employees. Did you hear that?
I have never drank in the restaurant. I did not hear of that at all.
Okay, because I believe we'd also been told one of the employees had taken a shot.
I couldn't tell you, ma'am. I didn't hear of that at all.
Okay, but it wasn't you.
No, it was not me at all. I didn't drink at that restaurant. I've never really drank, and I wasn't drunk that night either.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yes.
You said that one thing that you did witness was Peter shoving the customers out of the restaurant.
Yes.
And it's also your testimony he was loud and he was agitated.
Yes.
And he was pushing. Did you see any indication that either of the patrons were resisting leaving?
It seemed like the son seemed very mad. He also seemed mad that night. But the father, I think he was trying to de-escalate. But they were both kind of. He was kind of pushing, and they were on the phone, and he was trying to get. I'd say there was kind of a little resistance with it. When I first heard the altercation and I saw him kind of trying to push him, it took a while before they actually got to the front door.
Thank you.
Mr. Cavalier?
Yes, sir.
From what I gather, some of the other employees that were there present that night, besides Peter, are Cassandra Campbell. Is that a name ring a bell?
Yes.
Becca, I don't have a last name.
Yes, I just know her as Becca.
And Katie Cashman.
Yes.
Was there anyone else?
I don't recall anyone else being there that night.
Of those four people, can you tell me who's still employed?
Just Katie and me are employed.
Just Katie and you?
Oh, yes.
Did Becca and Cassandra, did they resign? Were they fired?
Both of them resigned. They both had their own reasons for leaving. I talked to Cassie about it. She told me her reasoning for leaving. She was she was anxious about things in her life, and she just wanted to not work there anymore. And I didn't talk to Becca about her reasonings.
When did they resign in relation to the event?
Becca she resigned a little bit. It was pretty recent. I couldn't tell you exactly, but just a little bit after the altercation had happened. And Cassandra, she left at around New Year's.
All right. How about Peter?
Peter, he was gone after the incident.
All right.
He doesn't work. He left that day. He wasn't allowed to come back.
Since the incident, have you seen him on the premises?
No.
All right, no further.
When you heard the yelling, was all Peter yelling, or did you hear these customers yell at any time?
Yes, I could hear some other male voices that I didn't recognize yelling with him.
Okay, so there was a yelling incident between Peter and one or more of the customers.
Yeah, I thought at first I thought it was him yelling at Becca a second time, but then I heard male voices and I couldn't tell you who it was, and then I kind of looked around the kitchen and I saw two guys, but I didn't know at that point in time what was going on.
Did you hear anything could you understand anything the customer said?
Not really. I was kind of on this side of the building, and they were more of on this side of the building, and I could hear the yelling, but I couldn't decipher any of it.
Was the one customer on the cell phone to 911 the first time you saw him?
Not the first time. I mean, I just saw him for a brief period of time. I didn't see a cell phone at that point. But the second time, when they were closer to the front door, I did see him on the phone.
Did Katie indicate any need to call 911 at any time?
I don't know. I didn't see her until after the altercation. I didn't see anything of her, honestly.
Okay. Thank you very much. You're excused.
Thank you.
I would next call Katie Cashman.
Good evening. Would you state your name, please?
Katie Cashman,
Spell your last name.
C-A-S-H-M-A-N.
Thank you. Would you raise your right hand? You swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give to this authority is truthful?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Cashman, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
Can you speak into the microphone, please, so we can hear you?
Is it? Yeah.
That's better.
Okay.
Thank you.
Get as close to it as you can. Good.
Ms. Cashman, over here, I'm
Counselor?
going to ask you some questions.
Okay.
That's right. Were you actually working at the Old Mill Brewery on the night of November 5th, 2014?
Yes.
Let's start with earlier in the night. Did you see Peter, you know who Peter is?
Mm-hmm.
Did you see him have any arguments with any other employees?
No.
Okay. Did you see have any confrontation with any patrons?
No.
Okay. Did you, so you didn't see any fight, any altercation?
Not before.
You were
anything
working
happened.
that night?
Yeah.
And what was your position that night?
Manager.
Manager. So were you in charge?
Right.
Okay. And Peter, was he working that night?
Mm-hmm.
And what was his position?
He's working, he's like bar manager, and I'm like general.
You're the general manager, and he's sort of the bar manager that night?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you were in charge, but he was also a manager?
Right.
And at some point, was there an altercation? You didn't see any altercation?
Prior to anything happening?
Right. Well, what's
Or any altercation? No, I didn't see any altercation, no.
You didn't see an altercation between Peter and the patrons, right?
No.
But then you saw Peter come back in at some point? Come back in from outside?
After everything happened?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Okay. And then tell us what you saw.
After?
Yeah.
Like-
So, well, first of all, was anyone else in the Old Mill Brewery when Peter came back in from outside?
After everything happened?
Yeah.
No. I'm the only one inside when Peter comes inside.
So it was just you and him
Mm-hmm.
at first at the Old Mill Brewery, and then did an officer come in?
Correct.
And what happened?
And then he asked what was going on, asking Peter what was going on, like trying to get the story of what was happening. And then another officer came in asking where the gun was. And then he was like, yeah, there's a gun. And then he told them, they kind of just kept discussing what happened. He's like, all right, well, let's all just calm down now, and we'll figure out what's going on.
Okay, so they told Peter to have a seat?
Right. He was like, well, let's just all calm down, and we'll just wait a second. We'll just hang out here for a second. And then
Who said that?
The officer.
Okay.
Yeah. And then Peter asked to smoke a cigarette. And he was like, no, I think we should all just stay right here. And he's like, well, sir, I do think I should be able to go have a cigarette at, my family's restaurant. And then he goes, and he's like, no. And he starts to go walk towards the table. And the officer comes up behind him and grabs his arm and pushes him up against the table.
So he was actually walking to the table to sit down?
Right. He was kind of like, okay, I won't go smoke. I'm just going to go sit
And
down.
that's when the officer grabbed him?
Correct, and pushed him into the table.
Prior to the
Put
officer
his arm-
grabbing him, did Peter do anything to the officer?
No.
And was Peter complying with the officer's commands?
Yes.
And then the officer pushed Peter against the table and grabbed his arm?
Right.
And
Well, he
then-
grabbed his arm and pushed him up against the table.
And then what did that officer do next?
And then another officer came in and punched him across the face.
Okay. So one officer was grabbing him and had his arm, and then the other officer came in and punched Peter in the face?
Right. So Peter's like, up against the table like this. Punches him across the face.
And was this all unprovoked?
Right, yeah, he was just standing there. And then I was like, he's not doing anything, get off him, and then it got crazy.
So you were saying that he wasn't doing, you were telling the officers
Yeah, like he's not resisting, he's going to sit down. That's why I was screaming at them.
And at this point, did Peter resist at all?
No, I didn't see any resisting.
And you were there the whole time?
Mm-hmm.
Peter never resisted?
Correct.
Was he cooperative?
Yeah.
Was he compliant?
Yeah, he was like totally going to go sit down. Then they pushed him up against the table and they punched him across the face and then it all moved. And then they all started beating him up.
Okay, and then another officer came in?
After they had already been like towards the, like further in the restaurant, and the two officers are beating him up and kicking him, and then the one tased him. And then more officers came in, and some of them went towards the fight, and the other ones started pushing all the bar chairs out of the way and telling me to move out of the way also. And I had gone up there while they were already, before other officers came in, I went up there and was like, still, like, he's not doing anything, get off him. And I was like standing over him when they tased him. Still trying to be like, that's not happening.
And was Peter fighting back?
No, he was screaming, but that's it. He wasn't, because he was like in the fetal, like it was not much room to fight back.
He was on the ground with two officers?
Correct.
And one of them was punching him?
Right. They're like punching and kicking him, and then he tased him.
And there's also some allegations that you were drinking that night. Did you have anything to drink that night?
I had tasters. We had new beers on draft.
Tell us what a taster is.
It's just like a 1 ounce in a shot glass. You just do like a small taste to see if a customer would want a full one. And so I just tasted it. That way I can tell them.
So it's an ounce of beer?
Right. It's very small. And it's just like a sip. I don't even drink the whole.
Just so you could advise customers?
Yeah, kind of recommend it, what it would taste like to them.
Okay. But you weren't intoxicated at
No,
all?
no.
Okay. Clear and coherent that night?
Correct.
No further questions?
You and Peter are boyfriend and girlfriend, correct?
Yes.
How long have you been boyfriend and girlfriend?
Almost 2 years.
You don't want anything bad to happen to him or to Vasilios, his father, correct?
Correct.
So it's your testimony tonight that you had no idea what was going on this entire evening until the cops arrived.
I was there when he was yelling at Becca, and the customers came over and started asking if we were okay. And I was like, everything's fine. And then we went to the back bar. And then Peter came to the back bar and was talking with us. And then he went back up front. And then everyone's going, I'm walking Becca out to the back door. And then I hear him telling them, get out, get the fuck out, get the fuck out. And then I called Cody.
Let's slow down a little bit and let's break it down. So you were there when Peter was yelling at Becca.
Correct.
And he's screaming at her, correct?
Mm-hmm.
He's yelling obscenities?
Well, he's yelling at her, yeah.
Yelling obscenities?
Yeah.
He's saying things like, fuck. He's saying, I'm the manager, you're below me, correct?
I don't recall him saying that. He's saying fuck like in the way, a part of phrases that he's saying.
And he was yelling so loud that customers within the bar could hear him, correct?
The only two customers are the two gentlemen, and yes, they heard him.
Okay. He was yelling at her about paperwork she had done incorrectly?
As far as I know, I wasn't there when she initially happened. I walked up when the yelling was happening.
Okay. So you're not sure what she had done incorrectly?
Correct.
If she had done paperwork incorrectly, whose responsibility would that be to reprimand her?
That would be mine.
You're the general manager?
Correct.
And he was only acting as the bar manager that night?
Mm-hmm.
He was pretty out of control, correct?
I wouldn't say out of control. He was yelling at her, reprimanding her.
Was he amped up?
He was angry.
You would say he was angry.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think he was acting in a professional manner?
I would say, I guess not to be yelling like that. It wouldn't be completely professional.
You don't think it's completely professional?
Correct.
Is that how you, as the general manager, would want customers to see
No.
you or your employees act?
No.
Now, you had... Do you remember speaking to Corporal or Sergeant Ike?
I'm not sure what their names are.
Okay. Sergeant Ike has kind of blonde hair, heavier set.
I believe so. That's the one I probably talked to the most.
Yeah, the
if
one you
that's who
spent the
he
most
is.
time with?
Yes.
Do you remember telling Sergeant Ike that Peter was amped up and was yelling?
I remember telling him that he was yelling.
Okay. And you don't remember you saying to Sergeant Ike that he was amped up?
No.
No, Peter was drinking, correct?
I saw him take a shot
He only took one shot?
that I saw.
And where were you most of the night prior to him yelling at Becca?
I was out in the bar. I'm out in the restaurant area.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then after the incident with Becca, you guys went to the back portion of the restaurant?
Correct, Becca and I.
And is that where you remained until the police officers arrived?
Until I had come back up front, and that's when Peter came inside.
Okay.
And that was up front.
Now, you initially told Sergeant Ike that you had nothing to drink, correct?
Correct.
So you lied to Sergeant Ike.
Well, he had asked me if I had been drinking tonight, and I said no. And he's like, well, I smell alcohol in your breath. I was like, oh, I forgot. I did have 2 tasters.
And 2 tasters would be equivalent to 2 drinks.
No.
Okay.
No,
well, that's what
absolutely
you
not.
told Sergeant Ike that night.
No, I told him I had 2 tasters that night.
Okay. You never told Sergeant Ike that she stated in total she had about 2 drinks.
I did not say that. I specifically said tasters.
Now, you wrote a statement, correct?
Yes.
And in your statement, you indicated Peter asked if he could smoke a cigarette outside. The officer said no. Peter said, "This is my property."
Mm-hmm.
You wrote that?
Yes.
And you actually put that in quotes, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Peter, X in general, that this is his property, correct?
No, it's just that it's his family's, not like
Okay.
it's his.
Have you ever heard him say that he's the king, he's in charge?
No, I've never heard him say he's the king.
What about he's in charge?
No.
You missed the entire incident with Robert and Joshua White?
The only time I saw them was and once it had escalated, was when they came over and asked me if everything was okay when they came and involved themselves in the waitress station.
Okay.
Before that, everything was fine. I brought them their food, and everyone was happy.
And then everything that happened between the incident with Becca and before the police arrived, you were in that back portion of the restaurant and you did not observe?
With Becca, correct.
Now, getting to when the officers arrived, you basically have told us that Peter wanted to smoke, and then the officer said, no, stay here. That's when he made, at least what you said on direct, that Peter made the comment that this is my restaurant. In your statement, you said, Peter said, this is my property. Is that the same statement?
That it's his family's restaurant, and it's my property. The same, I would say, the same idea.
And Peter began actually walking to the table.
Yes.
And at that point, how many officers were in the restaurant?
1, when he was walking towards the table.
And that's when the officer grabs him. How did the officer grab him?
He took his arm from behind, he took his arm like this and pushed him up against the table.
So he grabbed which arm?
I would think it would be his right. His right arm, because the officer's on this side of Peter, and he's here. So he walked up like this and grabbed his arm and pushed him like this.
So the officer was on his right side?
Correct.
Officer grabs his right arm and then takes it and pins it behind his back.
Yeah, he takes it like this and then pushes him up against the table.
And at that point, Peter complies.
Mm-hmm.
Peter effectively lays down on the table.
Well, he pushes him into the table like this.
Okay, so Peter goes with him.
Right.
And lays his belly on the table.
He's pushed into it.
All right, he's pushed into it. And Peter is not doing anything at this point?
He's not, it's just happening. Yeah.
Just letting the officer push him against the table.
Right. Yeah. Like, not, yeah. It's like he's not resisting anything.
And is Peter saying anything at this point?
If he's saying something, he's saying, I'm going to sit down, but I can't tell you what he's saying because I'm trying to be like, what's going on? He's trying to sit down.
And how far away were you?
I'm right there. I'm not far away.
Well, tell us how far.
Well, so I'm like here, and the table's like there, I guess. The table will be here, so I'll be here. And then I go up behind them, like, what the heck's going on?
So you're about 6 feet away, give or take?
Can you step up to the mic?
Yeah,
Ann?
sorry.
I know you're
I'm sorry.
showing this, but
Trying to show.
come back and forth.
When Peter's laying on the table, that's when the other officer came in?
Yes.
And do you remember what that officer looked like?
I know that he was tall and had bald head.
Tall and bald?
Mm-hmm.
The first officer, what did he look like?
He had dark hair and glasses.
Dark hair and glasses?
Mm-hmm.
When you say dark hair, are you talking black?
Yeah. Yes.
The other officer is tall and bald, completely bald?
I don't know if it's completely bald. I just know there wasn't like a dominant color on his head. It was like a dark bald head.
And that officer comes in. Did you see that officer enter the restaurant?
Yep, I saw him coming because I'm angled towards
Okay.
that same view.
And when that officer approaches, what does that officer do?
He punches Peter in the face.
Okay, so Peter is laying over the table.
Right.
And the officer comes from which direction?
From the right. He comes in this way.
Okay. And the officer punches Peter.
Right.
What side of the table was the officer on?
The officer's on the right. He punches Peter on the right side of his face. He comes, the door's on the right, so he comes in this way and punches him on the side.
Which hand did the officer use?
To punch him? Mm-hmm. I would say his right, because of the way that he came in, because he was like over the way he punched him. He couldn't have done it with his left.
And how many times did the officer punch?
The first initial one, it was just one punch to the face, and then they all started falling into the tables.
And when you say they all fell to the tables, could you describe that in more detail?
The three of them just start moving towards, they're all just going towards the patio doors, and then Peter's on the ground.
And who was propelling the movement towards the patio door?
I can't say. That's just, to me, all three of them were moving.
Okay, kind of like a blob?
Right.
When they fall on the ground, what can you see?
Peter on the ground and the officers hitting him.
Which officers were hitting?
The two that I just described.
Okay. And how are they hitting?
They're punching and kicking.
And how many times did you say that these officers were punching and kicking? Let's start with the tall, bald officer.
I couldn't say a number. I can't think of a tally of it going on.
The tall, bald officer, did that person punch?
Yeah, they were both doing both actions.
Okay, so let's break it down. Can you break down who did what?
No, they're both doing it.
Okay. And the officer with the dark black hair and glasses, how tall was that officer?
How tall is he? I'm not sure how tall he is. He's probably my height, if not a little shorter. He's not taller than I am, I wouldn't say. Or maybe he could be, because him and Peter next to each other when they were talking, I would say slightly taller than I am.
Okay. And so they're both just kicking and punching. Where are the punches and the kicks landing?
Well, the taller bald officer is towards his head, and the other one's towards his torso area, because he's punching that area and the other guy's towards the top, and then that's when he tased him in his body on
So
the
the
side.
tall, bald officer was towards Peter's head, and that's where he was kicking and punching. Peter's on the ground,
Correct.
and you indicated in a fetal position? And the tall, bald officer was standing?
They're both standing.
The other officer, the one with the dark hair and the glasses, he is more at Peter's midsection?
Correct.
And he is also standing, punching and kicking. You indicated that other officers came in and they actually cleared the way so that there weren't any tables or chairs interfering with what
No,
these
they
officers
moved the
were doing?
bar stools. No tables. The bar stools along the side.
And during this time, is anybody saying anything?
Are they saying anything? Everyone's screaming, and I'm screaming to make it stop, telling
What
them
are they
to stop.
screaming?
I'm not sure what they're screaming. There's like a lot of noise going on, and all I can think of is what I'm trying to tell them to stop hitting him. He's not resisting.
So you're not sure what the officers are saying?
Correct.
How many officers were in at this point?
At that point, I'd say maybe like 4 more came in.
And so 4 more officers are just standing around watching while these 2 officers are kicking and punching.
Some of the other officers got involved and were also attacking Peter.
All right, so how many more were kicking and punching?
I would say 3 of them, because the other one's telling me he's moving the tables and asking me to get out of the way.
Okay. So one is controlling you and moving the stools, you said.
Correct.
And 3 other officers are also now participating in the kicking and the punching.
Right.
So we have 5 officers kicking and punching Peter.
Right.
And how long did this go on?
For a few minutes. I mean, it was like happening maybe 5 minutes. I'm not sure at the time.
5 minutes?
Maybe. I'm not sure of the time. It was happening really fast, and it was crazy.
And during this entire time, Peter's just laying on the ground in a fetal position.
Right, screaming, like, stop fucking hitting me.
When does the tasing happen?
The tasing happens before the other officers come in.
So Peter's on the ground. He's in a fetal position. The officers clearly have control over him at this point. They are kicking and punching him.
Right.
And at some point, one of the officers decides to taser him on top of that.
Correct.
Which officer decided to taser him?
The one with the dark hair.
The dark hair and glasses officer?
Correct.
And how many times was Peter tasered?
I saw the one time.
And why don't you describe that?
When it happened, he pulled his shirt, came up, and he tased him on his side, right onto his chest.
So the officer pulled up Peter's shirt.
It could have been up already because of all the rumbling going around. But his skin is up, and then he puts it on his skin and tases him.
The officer never deployed the taser barbs. Nothing shot from the taser.
It was on his skin.
Okay.
It was on it. That's all I saw.
The officer pulled the taser, go up, and actually place the taser onto Peter's back.
Correct.
So Peter gets tased. When, during all this, did he get into handcuffs?
Not until all the officers had been inside, and then they all put him together, and he was in Indian style, and they put him in handcuffs and took him out.
Okay, so the 2 officers were kicking and punching him. He then gets tased. 4 more officers come in, 3 of which continue to punch and kick him. Approximately 5 minutes or so passes.
The 5 minutes is the whole bulk lump sum, not once the other guys come in. And then they come in and do it, and then they put him in, he's Indian style, and they put him in handcuffs and take him out.
And who puts him in handcuffs?
I don't know. They're all staying up on top, around him.
And where did you go? Did you remain in the bar after Peter was handcuffed and taken out?
Yep, I stayed inside, and then I went back, and then for a while, and then I went outside.
And when you went outside, did you hear Peter?
I could hear him screaming.
And he was screaming, where was he?
He was on the other side of Wrap across the street from the restaurant. I couldn't see him because there's a police car in front.
And was the fire department there?
I think they were, I think they were there. I saw an ambulance, not a fire truck.
And what was he screaming?
Katie, come here. Come help me.
Did you hear him make threats to shoot the officers?
No.
Did you hear him cussing and screaming at the officers?
I heard him screaming, this is fucking bullshit. Katie, come here, come help me. And then I could hear him say, don't stick any needles in me. I don't want any needles. Don't stick that shit in my arm. I don't like needles.
Basilios, and you know him as Bill. Did you see him arrive?
Yes.
And he was screaming and yelling at the officers too, correct?
No, he came running up when Peter was screaming about the needles, and he was trying to figure out, he was like, what's going on? Let me go talk to him. I'll calm him down.
He came up to you?
No, I was out by, did you say Ike? Was that one officer's
Sergeant
name?
Ike?
I was standing next to him over at the driveway, and that's when Bill came running up. And then there was another sergeant. He asked for the sergeant, and he came walking up to him. And he was just kind of asking what's going on and what's happening with my son. Because you could hear Peter saying, I don't want any needles. Don't stick the needles in my arm.
So Bill was just asking what's going on?
Correct.
What type of tone was he using?
Just excited. Like, what's going on with my son? I have to talk to my son.
He wasn't yelling at the officers?
No. Just talking. He's not yelling. It's different. He kind of talks loud.
How many times would you say officers punched and kicked Peter?
I can't say a number.
Would you say the attack was violent?
Yes.
Vicious?
Yeah. It was crazy.
Brutal?
Yeah.
I have no further questions.
A brief follow-up. Ms. Cashman, you said that it's after this incident was over, Bill arrived at the scene.
Correct.
Did you call Bill?
Did I call Bill? Yeah.
And did you tell him what happened?
I was telling him what was happening, that the cops had just gotten here. Peter had an argument with the customers, and the cops are here.
What actually did you tell Bill? Did you tell him that Peter got beat up by officers?
Well, Bill had called again and asked what's going on. And I was like, well, right now there's officers staying over Peter, beating him up. And he's like, what's going on? I was like, and now he's in a fetal, or now he's Indian style, and they have him in handcuffs, and now he's walking out the door.
So before Bill arrived, you told him that the officers were beating up Peter?
That it was happening, yeah.
And that it was unprovoked?
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah.
Nothing further.
Ms. Cashman, how long have you worked at the old mill?
Almost 2 years.
Okay. Before I start these questions. Let me ask you directly. Do you have any reluctance to testify tonight? Are you in all fear of your job if you do testify?
No.
Okay. Right. Have you heard Peter yell at other employees in the bar before?
Not like this.
Has he yelled at you?
Does he yell at me? No.
Yes. Okay. What's been the nature of the other yelling incidents?
Just kind of like, you should be doing your job. This is what you have to do. It's nothing like,
Has he been in other confrontations with customers?
no, I've never seen any.
Is it his usual practice to drink during the evening?
No.
You think he was intoxicated the night of November 5th?
No.
Okay. In your interaction with the police officers, what was Peter doing as he was trying to approach and get a cigarette? Was he in control? Was he animated? Was he talking loud? What was he doing?
He was very calm and just being very cooperative with them and just kind of asking if he could go out. And he didn't seem like, any kind of, like he didn't until the officer said no, he couldn't have a cigarette. And he was like, well, I really think I should be able to. And then he said no again. He was back down to not worrying about it.
Did he flinch or react to the officer?
No.
Did the officer put his hand on him?
Yes.
And what did the officer do when he put his hand on him?
He put it behind his back and pushed him into the table.
Okay. At that time, did Peter's demeanor change?
No. I mean, it's the same, just kind of like, what the hell's going on? But I was also watching in shock.
Okay. And at what point did you call the owner?
I had called him before the initial cop came inside the first time. Once the altercation happened outside with the customers and Peter came inside, that's when I called Bill.
Okay. Just to be clear, you knew there was some kind of incident between Peter and customers?
Correct.
Okay. Did you call 911?
No.
Why not?
Because it never got to a point where I felt it had to do that. Call 911. Because he wasn't in any kind of the altercation. I heard the yelling, and then I told Cody to go out front, and it was like, I didn't even think about. I was kind of concerned about what was happening.
You told who to go out front?
Cody.
And,
Jonathan. I'm sorry.
okay.
Sorry. Jonathan.
All right. And what was Becca doing at this point?
At which point?
As this started to unfold, Peter had started out yelling at Becca. What happened to Becca during this time?
Becca, we were both standing there when Peter was yelling, and then we went to the back bar to finish her cash out, and then we were in the back, and then I walked back out the back.
Okay. Over the past couple of months, have you discussed this incident with Peter?
With Peter? Yeah.
Okay. And having discussed that with Peter, has your perception of how things evolved changed or unfolded?
I don't understand. I mean, nothing's changed with the way that I feel what I saw happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
You've not discussed or rehearsed your testimony with Peter?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Okay. And how many times have you talked to counsel about this, to Mr. Menges?
I've talked about it once.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
I want to ask you about the organization structure again. I'm kind of confused.
Okay.
You're the general manager of the restaurant and the bar, is that correct?
Correct.
And does Peter work for you? Does he report to you?
Yes.
And who do you report to?
Bill and Kathy.
So you were in charge that evening?
Mm-hmm.
I have no further questions.
You, if I understand you correctly, you were present when the first police officer came in and encountered Peter?
Yes.
Is it your testimony that he asked Peter one single time to sit at the table, and then when Peter, you say he was walking to the table, there was no other commands other than that one command, lawful command from the officer for Peter to sit at the table? Is that your testimony?
Well, yes, because at first when he was like, okay, well, let's all just calm down and we'll just hang out in here. And then he was like, well, can I go out and smoke a cigarette? He's like, no, I'd like you to have a seat.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
When you testified that the officer grabbed his arm, When he grabbed his arm, was Peter's arm at his sides or was it elevated?
No, they were, yeah, because he was just kind of walking. He was just kind of walking to the table.
And then the officer grabbed his wrists?
Correct. Yeah, he just grabbed it, and then it was behind his back.
Do you recall at all if Peter perhaps flinched up and drawed up and sent some sort of physical signal to the officer that the officer would then take as resistance and move the arm to the back?
I couldn't say I saw anything like that. I just saw him take the arm, and then he was up against the table.
So once he grabbed the wrist, it was kind of a fluid motion to put the arm behind the back?
Yes, yeah.
And then to confirm, you said that Peter was on the table when the second officer entered the bar. The second officer had come into the bar, and there was no more talking. The first officer already had Peter up against the table. Is that correct?
When the second officer came in?
Yes.
Yes. All that was happening was Peter was up against the table.
And there was no conversation at that point?
Correct.
Happening?
No.
And the officer came in directly from the door, straight to where the other officer had Peter, and began with a strike?
Yes.
At any point,
they all three of them moved as a fluid, contiguous group to, when they moved, then they were propelled. They were all together, all three of them.
Correct.
The second officer wasn't chasing.
No, to me,
it wasn't like two of them went together and then
yeah.
the second officer
To
was
me,
chasing.
it just seemed all three of them were going. And I was like, what the heck is going on?
And when they landed, did Peter land on top of another, or did both of them land on top of him?
I would say, like, they fell, like, Peter was going down, and maybe their, like, knees went down, but then, like, I can't even say it. Like I said, it all happened, and then it just went into fighting.
at any point did you hear the officers use the command stop resisting or stop fighting?
No.
Did you hear the officer say taser, taser, taser?
I heard him say that a tase is happening. I can't say what, but I knew, like, oh my God, this is happening, and then it happened.
When they tased him, was he in the field position and they were both on their feet?
Correct. He was on his side.
And how far away was he from the officers when they tased him? Or were they standing right
They were
over?
right there. They were right up on top of him, and I'm right there also.
In your responsibility, do you tend bar or do you serve customers?
I do both.
Are you trained to recognize an intoxicated person?
Yes.
And it's your testimony that Peter was not intoxicated?
Correct.
No watery eyes, no slurring?
No, everything was great. Everyone was like in a great mood. Everything was positive.
Okay.
Ms. Cashman, what happened from everything was great till when he was yelling at Becca?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, everything was great, and then obviously something wasn't great anymore.
Yeah, next thing I knew, he's yelling at Becca.
Any indication why?
No, I don't know. I just know it's about paperwork. Like, they came in, I come in, Becca's walking away from Peter. Peter follows her into the waitress station. He's yelling. And I'm like, what the heck's going on?
And you said, in response to Ms. McCarthy, that it's not the way you'd like to see, you wouldn't want customers to see that.
Correct.
Did you speak with Peter about it? Did you talk to him? Did you say anything about him yelling at her?
Well, I was there during it happening. It was like, dude, calm down, calm down. There's customers. What's going on? Trying to figure out.
And then did you have anything else to say to him about it as someone who was in charge that night?
Then after that, I went in the back with Becca after the gentleman asked if we were okay. Just kind of trying to separate myself, keep all of us separate and keep him up here.
Thank you.
Sure.
So it's my understanding as general manager and responsible for the staff that you did not ask why Peter was yelling and screaming at her?
I was trying to understand while it was happening, and then it happened, and then I went to the back with Becca, and then there was no time to figure out what was going on. Everything escalated after that.
All right, thank you.
So Peter was bartending that night. Was he giving out free drinks, free shots?
He gave one to the customer. the gentleman involved. That's
To
the one I
which
saw.
one?
What's that?
To which gentleman?
The older gentleman? The dad, I'm guessing?
Did you
The
give
white
shots
male?
to anybody?
No.
You didn't offer them to the two gentlemen?
Did I offer them shots? Yeah, I offered, like, do you guys want to do shots? And that's when the dad came over and took shots.
What was that again?
That's when the dad came over and took a shot. I offered if they wanted to do shot. Because Peter had asked, so I went and asked them if they wanted to do one. And then
Oh,
they
the
came
dad.
over.
Okay.
The father came over.
Did you offer one to the son?
Did I offer one to him? I said, do you guys want to do shots?
Did you know how old he was?
No. I would have asked him if he would have said yes.
So first you would offer them a shot, and then you would ask for his ID.
Right.
I think it's usually the other way around. But
If they had asked for it, I would ask them for it. But if I'm offering them out and be like, wait a second, are you even old enough?
To your observation, did the customers have any more alcohol than what you've described?
Not that I saw.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you recall the nature of the shot?
I know it was a whiskey with pickle juice or jalapeno juice.
Any further questions?
all right now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
What's that? My next witness is Vasilio Franginkakis, but we're asking him to take a quick bathroom break. Is that possible?
Would you get closer to the mic and say
I'm
that
sorry.
again?
Vasilio Franginkakis is my next witness, but we're actually both asking for a quick bathroom break before we go into his testimony. Is that possible?
I still didn't understand your question.
We're asking for a bathroom break.
Should we take a recess?
I think we'll have a recess until 8:30 p.m.
Thank
The hearing will come back into session.
May I call my next witness?
State your name, please.
Vasilios Frangiskakis,
And you are?
the owner of Old Mill Brewery.
Thank you.
Mr. Franginkakis, are you the sole owner of the Old Mill Brewery?
Excuse me, Chairman British, did you swear in the witness, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you are about to give before this authority is truthful?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, are you the sole owner of the Old Mill Brewery?
Yes,
Does your son, Peter Franginkakis is your son, correct?
correct.
Does he have any ownership interest in the Old Mill Brewery?
None.
And the liquor license is in your name, correct?
Correct.
Does Peter have any ownership interest in the license, the liquor license?
No.
And how long have you had this liquor license?
I think since 2010.
And prior to that, what?
2008.
So you've had this liquor license in your name since 2010?
Correct.
And then prior to that, it was in a corporate name?
Correct.
And then have you had any other liquor licenses?
Yes, in the city of Denver, city of Aurora, in Florida.
Okay. Did you ever have any problems with those 3 liquor licenses?
Never.
And how long have you been in the restaurant business?
39 years.
And how long did you own those other liquor licenses or have those other liquor licenses?
17 years. 5 years.
Okay. And your son Peter works for you?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Well, we'll get to that. So back before he was working for you for the Old Mill Brewery?
Correct.
How often would he work?
3 days, 4 days max.
3 or 4 days a week?
Yes.
And what was his position?
Bar manager.
So he was never in charge?
Never.
There was always someone, such as Ms. Cashman, that was in charge?
Correct.
And let's turn to that night, the night of November 4th, 2014. Do you remember that night?
Yes.
Were you at the Old Mill Brewery earlier that night?
No.
So you didn't witness any of the events that we were talking about here today?
No.
Did someone call you from the Old Mill Brewery?
Yes.
Was that Ms. Cashman?
Correct.
What did Ms. Cashman tell you had happened?
That there was an argument with customers.
That what?
There was an argument with 2 customers, and Peter had him leave.
Got him to leave? Okay. What did Katie Cashman tell you as far as what happened between Peter and the officers?
That Peter got beat up by the police department.
Did she say that Peter got beat up by the police unprovoked?
Correct.
And was she pretty adamant about that?
Extremely adamant.
And was she pretty excited about the whole situation?
Very excited.
So did you talk to anyone else before you got to the Old Mill Brewery that night?
I don't think so.
So when you got there, you'd only talked to Katie Cashman, and Katie Cashman told you that these officers beat up Peter for no reason, right?
Correct.
And you didn't have any other side of the story?
No.
So you were a little bit upset with the officers when you got there?
Very upset.
Okay. But you didn't do anything to intrude, or you did what they told you to do?
Exactly what they told me to do.
So you were cooperative?
Extremely cooperative.
And despite what may or may not have happened, did you fire Peter because of this?
Yes.
That night?
Yes.
Has Peter ever worked there since?
No.
Is Peter even allowed to hang out at the establishment?
No.
Absolutely not?
Absolutely not.
There's some questions concerning if there's any alcohol on your breath that night. Do you drink, sir?
No, sir.
You don't drink alcohol at all?
No.
Were you drinking that night?
No, sir.
Do you believe Peter's actions should have any effect on your liquor license?
Absolutely not.
Did you put Peter up to this, or think or know that he was going to have an altercation that night, whatever actually did happen?
No, sir.
No further questions?
You are aware that the law requires that your employees act in a professional manner, correct?
Correct.
You're aware that your employees need to call the police when there's some sort of disorderly conduct within the bar, correct?
Correct.
None of your employees did call the police that night, correct?
Correct.
You indicated that you fired Peter immediately. And what's your plan for keeping him out of the bar? He's your son, after all.
What do you mean, what's my plan?
What's your plan for keeping him out of the bar?
I tell him not to come to the bar. He won't come to the bar.
Won't come to the bar. He won't come see you?
If he comes to see me and come to the bar, it's 2 different things.
Okay, so it's okay if he comes to see you at the bar?
No, it's okay because I'm always in the kitchen. I'm not in the bar.
All right, so you fired him, but your intention is that he doesn't have to remain off premises.
No, my son does not need to be off my premises. If he needs me to come see me, he can come see me.
So if he needs to come see you, he can come see you at the bar because you're in the kitchen.
Okay, not in the bar, in the kitchen. That's a back door. You come into the kitchen. That's where I'm always at.
You actually have no firsthand knowledge of what occurred, correct?
Correct.
You based all your decisions and your actions upon what Katie Cashman told you.
Yes, in previous encounters with the police department of the city of Littleton.
Okay. And when you arrived on scene, you were pretty hot, correct?
Not correct.
Not correct. You weren't yelling.
No, ma'am.
So you heard Commander Iman's testimony, and he indicated that you were yelling at him.
He's a liar.
He's a liar.
Correct.
You've called Commander Iman a liar.
Absolutely.
Okay. I will remind you you're under oath.
I already know I'm under oath. You don't need to remind me.
You also talked to Sergeant Ike that night.
Correct.
Sergeant Ike, if he wrote in his report that you were yelling, he would also be a liar?
Correct.
So you were very calm.
I was upset.
You were upset, but you were calm. You were talking in a
Big
professional
difference between
demeanor.
calm and upset.
You were talking in a professional manner.
I'm always professional.
Commander Iman, you went right up to him as soon as you arrived on scene, correct?
Wrong.
Wrong?
Correct.
You did not talk to Commander Iman?
I did not go right up to him.
Okay. Who did you go up to first?
I was across the street, and Officer Kiefer came to me.
So Officer Kiefer comes to you, and you spoke to Officer Kiefer first?
Correct.
And what's your opinion on Officer Kiefer? Is he also a liar?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Would it be fair to say that all the officers there are liars?
Totally disagree with that.
Totally disagree with that?
Correct.
So Officer Kiefer's a liar, Ivan's a liar, Sergeant Ike's a liar. Who else is a liar?
I don't know.
You don't know. So you spoke to Officer Kiefer. When did you speak with Commander Iman?
Commander Iman came across the street.
And he came across the street because you were yelling, correct?
Wrong.
How many times did you talk to Commander Iman that night?
2.
Times. And both times you were calm.
Correct.
How long would you say you talked to Commander Iman?
I would know that.
You wouldn't know that. 5 minutes each time? 10 minutes each time?
I wasn't keeping time. My son is in an ambulance, so that's not what I'm going to keep time on.
And when you were on scene, your son was completely out of control, correct?
Totally wrong.
Totally wrong.
Correct.
He wasn't screaming at firefighters?
He was screaming for my help.
He wasn't threatening to shoot
Never.
officers? Did you arrive on scene when Peter was in the vehicle, patrol vehicle?
No.
You heard the testimony from Paul Amen. He was the fire officer, the captain.
Yes.
And when he said that Peter was making threats and screaming and yelling and acting out of control?
Not while I was there. The only thing Peter was screaming is about putting needles in his body. And Peter is terrified of needles. Okay. And I screamed that also. And no needles, no medicine.
The firefighters were working on Peter when you were there?
Yes.
Okay. Did you see them give him a dose of Versed?
I don't know what they gave him, but they gave him a shot.
Okay, they gave him a shot and he continued to amp up?
No.
Continued to yell and scream?
No.
And then they gave him a shot of ketamine. Did you see the second shot?
Yes.
And it wasn't until 2 minutes after the second shot that he finally stopped screaming and yelling.
He was not screaming and yelling other than, don't give me a needle.
Okay. So the captain of the fire department, Mr. Emmon, he was also lying.
Yes.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
I don't have any further questions.
You fired Peter that night?
Correct, sir.
You fired him because he got beat up?
2 reasons I fired Peter, sir. One, because I knew I was going to be in front of you. And second, I'm afraid for his life.
From whom?
Certain police officers in the city of Littleton.
Mr. Frankakakis, are you familiar with the terms of your license with the City of Littleton's authority?
Yes, sir.
And what does that say in general terms about the conduct of an establishment?
That we all have to be following the law.
Was Peter in charge that night?
No, sir.
But he said he was in charge.
No, you did not say that, sir.
We've heard testimony that he said on numerous occasions he was the manager that night. It was his bar.
He was the manager the night Katie was in charge. Two different things.
Okay. Why would you think Peter would say that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Why would you think Peter would say that he was the manager or was in charge?
He was the manager of the bar.
Had you heard him get into arguments with other employees?
No, sir.
Have you ever heard him discipline other employees?
He has reprimanded employees before, correct?
Yeah. Have you seen him lose his temper?
No, sir.
Okay. At the time you arrived on the scene, you encountered a number of police officers. What was your demeanor?
I was very respectful, extremely upset with my son laying on the stretcher.
What did you think when they assigned a police officer to keep watch over you for 40 minutes?
I don't believe they assigned him. As soon as Schiffer came, saw me, he came to me because we have history together.
What do you mean by history together?
I've been there for 7 years. I've seen Officer Kiefer numerous times in my establishment. He has eaten in my establishment. He has patronized my establishment. I have talked to Officer Kiefer. Officer Kiefer has threatened me in my establishment.
Did Officer Kiefer has threatened you?
You bet. Yes, sir.
Have you ever reported that to the police department?
Yes, sir.
Have you reported it to the district attorney's office?
No, sir.
There was some testimony that there's a standing practice in the police department to not let a single officer appear in the old mill, that always two officers have to be present because they are concerned about your temperament. Is that true?
Is that concerned about my temperament or is it concerned about their behavior?
What do you mean by that?
How would you like for me to come to your house, steal from you, and the Littleton police department do nothing?
Did you say steal from them?
Correct, sir.
Are you making the allegation that
I had customers steal from me and the police department did absolutely nothing?
Have police officers stolen from you?
No, sir.
Okay,
that's not what I said. Customers have stolen from me and the Littleton police department did absolutely nothing.
Have you made complaints about that?
Yes, sir.
To whom?
To your chief of police.
Have you reported to the district attorney's office?
No, sir.
Over the past several years, how many times have there been incidents reported to the police in the old mill?
What is several years, so I understand?
Well, how many fights are all...
I'm going to object to this line of questioning. We're here to talk about a specific violation. Anything before or after would be in the mitigation or aggravation stage, not a... it's not relevant to this violation.
I don't...
Counselor, he's made allegations against the police department. I want to hear what those allegations are.
I also don't think that it's about a discrete moment in time. It's about conduct of an establishment.
Talking about the conduct of an establishment on a date certain, not in general. That's what the violation's here. That's what we're here.
That's what you say the violation is?
That's what the violation is. That's what this hearing is for.
Okay.
It's not just any time ever. It's this what happened this night, and does it have to do with the licensee?
Okay. I appreciate your opinion on that.
We'll come back to that issue when we get to the next phase of the hearing. But so let's move on from that. You have another question?
Yeah, I'm intrigued by the allegations made by the licensee against the police department.
No allegations, facts, sir.
Well, we don't know their facts, sir.
Oh, I do. You don't, but I do.
Well, I guess there's another forum for that to be decided.
I guess so. It wasn't decided the first time, was it?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
They didn't do nothing about it, did they?
I'm not sure what you're referring to. have no further questions of the licensee.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have any further witnesses. Just argument.
City has no further witnesses.
No further witnesses from me, Your Honor.
Neither side has any other witnesses.
No further witnesses. I'm just going to ask to argue at the appropriate time.
This time, the authority
Chairman,
will.
can you allot some time for for the prosecution and the defense to argue? And you might want to set a time limit.
I don't believe mine will be very long at all.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Can you allow the defense and prosecution to argue their case now that they've presented the evidence?
Yes.
Do you mind if I stand up? I was sitting down. I don't work sitting down. I would like to thank the authority for being so patient. This was a very long case, but I thought it was very important that the authority hear from all the parties. Important enough that I elected not to offer any sort of stipulation. It's a very serious case. It's a very serious matter. And I thought it would not do it justice unless you heard from all the witnesses, or at least the majority of the witnesses. Conduct in establishment is kind of, in this particular case, kind of catches all of these actions that occurred. The authority had made some comments that were not necessarily concerned about the criminal actions that occurred at this bar, but I submit to you we are very concerned about the criminal actions. And the criminal actions are what give rise to the licensee being in violation of the conduct in an establishment ordinance. I'm not going to go through each and every one of the witnesses. I think the authority has listened to all the witnesses. We have the city's version of events, and we have the licensee's version of events. I'm going to talk briefly about the licensee's version of events. Jonathan Cavalier, I don't think he has much to add. He did not see all the portions. He saw very limited portions of what occurred. What I thought was interesting that Jonathan, and it was difficult to get out of him, but he describes Peter's behavior. He describes Peter's demeanor. He says that he is yelling obscenities, he's cussing, the word fuck was used a lot. He first says that he didn't believe Peter was overstepping his bounds, but then later says that it was not right for Peter to be yelling at someone like that. He also gives us that Peter said he was the manager and you're below me. This is a consistent theme throughout most of the witnesses, with the exception of a couple. Peter yelling that he's the manager, he's the boss, he's the king. And I think Jonathan does support a lot of what the city witnesses present. Katie Cashman, really the only thing of merit that I think she tells the authority is that in her written statement, Peter says, "This is my property." Now, in her testimony, she changes that, and Peter says, "This is the family restaurant." Other than that, I would ask the authority to find her completely incredible, unbelievable. She has bias and motivation. She is dating Peter. She doesn't want anything bad to happen to him. And she works at the old mill. Her version of events is bordering on being ridiculous. She describes how two officers viciously, violently, brutally attack Peter. She then describes how 3 additional officers join in the fray. Peter's down on the ground in a fetal position, and they just keep going. The injuries in this case don't support that. He had a contusion on his forehead. You heard from Captain Ammon. He had a contusion on his forehead. He had probe marks on his back where the taser went in. That was it. So I ask you to think about officers, and you saw the officers that came in. They're a bunch of fit officers. They're trained. They all know how to use their bodies. 5 officers were brutally, viciously attacking him. He has a contusion to the head, and he has taser probes. That's it. What she tells you today simply is not supported by the evidence that's presented here. Vasilios, once again, not present. All he knows is what he's been told by Ms. Cashman, and all he knows is that he doesn't like the police department. He tells you he was not angry. He tells you he was calm. I ask you to look at his demeanor tonight. Very indicative of possibly what was going on. And then you add to it what happened that night and all the emotions. What you have here and what was presented by the city is the epitome of a violation of conduct and establishment. You have a bar manager, an employee of Old Mill. I submit to you that based upon the evidence presented by the city, this is someone who believes he's the owner. He may not be the owner on paper, but he's the king. He's the boss. He's in charge. How many times do we hear this? This is my property. He's acting as if he's the boss. He's acting as if he's in charge. Commit a series of crimes, starting with Robert White, starting with Becca as he's screaming at Becca in front of customers. Robert White feels so strongly about it that he steps in. He steps in to protect her. He's just a customer. He didn't have to do that. He could have walked away and ignored it, but it was so egregious to him that he stepped in to try to prevent what was happening to her. Right there, violation of conduct and establishment. Screaming, cussing, yelling at an employee, number 1 violation. Number 2 violation, we're going to kick Robert White out because Robert White's calling the police. Robert White tells you, he comes up, and you can hear it on the 911 tape. He is not happy that Robert White is calling the police. That, I would submit to you, is a second violation, because when things are happening in the bar, it is the responsibility of employees, management, and owners to call the police, to ask for help from the police department. That is an obligation under the law. He is now attempting to prevent a customer from calling the police. He's attempting to subvert the law. Then we have the physical altercation between Robert and Peter. Licensee is going to dispute what went on, but listen to the tape again. Listen to the 911 tape. You can hear Peter screaming. That is the third violation of conduct and establishment. He is screaming and yelling at customers. Yes, there was an issue with the gun and all that. Robert White is very forthcoming. You saw his demeanor. He tells you, I was so concerned for the safety of my child that I felt like this had to end, and it had to end quickly. Robert tells you that Peter is on top of a customer. He is attacking his son. And Robert must do whatever he can do to prevent his son from getting injured. And then we come to the crux of it. We have officers, City of Littleton police officers, that we give them the power to do their jobs, to investigate crimes. They come to the scene and Corporal Carlson is attacked. All Corporal Carlson is trying to do at this point is figure out what's going on. Licensee is going to argue that Peter didn't have a gun, et cetera, et cetera. Those officers don't know that. They are coming in blind. They have no idea what's going on. You heard the 911 tape. It was loud. It was crazy. The dispatcher is relaying that information to these officers. These officers are coming in to a scene that they don't know what's going on. They have to control the scene. They have to determine what has happened. Peter, from the beginning, is out of control, not cooperating with officers. When Corporal Carlson pushes it and says, no, you're going to stay here and talk to me, that's when Peter grabs him in a bear hug and starts taking him towards the back window. We can't even trust in this establishment that our officers can go in there and do their jobs. He attacks him, he takes him down to the ground and starts punching him. That's when Officer Farmer steps in and uses force to end it. They have to tase him. He is out of control. He goes outside the establishment and continues to be out of control for a very significant period of time. He's threatening the police department. He's threatening the very people that come to help him, the firefighters and paramedics. And this is a huge continuing violation of conduct in an establishment by someone who is a manager, by someone who is the son of the licensee. That is the most credible evidence that the authority heard tonight. That's what happened. The 911 tape, you heard Peter's behavior on that. The city has proven this case. I'd ask you to sustain the violation in the conduct of an establishment. Thank you.
I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the facts of this case that we heard. I'm not going to spend much time at all responding to the city attorney's argument, because this has absolutely nothing to do with a liquor license violation at all. As Mr. Bradish said at the beginning of this hearing, we need to focus on a liquor code violation, not on a criminal case. What we heard was a criminal case against Peter Franginkakis. That has absolutely nothing to do with a liquor code violation. It was interesting. I'm certainly curious to see what's going to happen in his criminal case. We pretty much heard all the evidence on that, but I don't represent Peter Franginkakis. I don't have nothing to do with that case. He has an attorney on that case. None of us are judge nor jury on that case. None of that has anything to do with my client, Vasilio Franginkakis, who wasn't there and didn't have anything to do with any of this stuff. Peter Franginkakis is not on our side. He's on the other side. He's the reason he's here. He's the one putting this liquor license in jeopardy and his family's livelihood. He's not a friendly witness. He's in his own trouble, and I'm curious to see how that comes out, but it has nothing to do with us. It has nothing to do with the liquor license. It has nothing to do with the Old Mill Brewery. So we'll see. We heard all this evidence that Peter said it was his bar, that he was acting like an owner. Well, what does that have to do with anything? Who cares if he lied and told people he owned the place? What does that have to do? Where does it say anything about in the conduct in an establishment law? Where does that have to do with a liquor license at all? He doesn't own the bar. He doesn't own the liquor license. He has no ownership interest in the bar. He has in the establishment. He has no ownership interest, no possessory interest, no interest at all in the liquor license. So I understand that we heard all kinds of evidence, but he could have said he's the king of the world and that he owns the whole town of Littleton. That has about as much to do with this case as him saying he owned the bar, because it's just simply not true. As far as this, conduct and this sort of public, there was all kinds of evidence about. The evidence was that there was no one around. This place was actually closed. Peter was getting off work. Katie Cashman was in charge, but there was no other patrons there. There was no other citizens there. In fact, there was not a single person, both inside and what happened outside the establishment, except for staff and law enforcement. No one saw this. People get in fights in bars. Bouncers kick people out of bars. It has nothing to do with the liquor license. I've never seen anyone go after a liquor license because a bouncer got in a fight with someone at a club in all my years of doing this, both as a restaurant manager and owner before and as an attorney. Never. You can go after the bouncer if they're out of line, and they're doing this. They're prosecuting Peter. But to take away someone's liquor license, their livelihood, their ownership of a bar, I just don't understand it because it makes no sense. It makes about as much sense as this. I have a client that comes into my office, my secretary just decides to shoot this person, and they come after my law license. That's how much sense this makes. What does that have to do with my law license? Absolutely nothing. What does this have to do with Mr. Franginkakis' liquor license? Absolutely nothing. You can think whatever you want that Peter did, you can find him guilty in your head, we'll see what happens, but it has nothing to do with his liquor license. I'm not responsible for my employees, especially when I'm not even there. He wasn't even there. Was he agitated that night? Of course he was agitated that night. Whatever you believe, the only information that Mr. Franginkakis had that night when he got there was from Katie Cashman. You can believe her or not, but that's the only story he got. And what he got was that these officers, without Peter provoking him, beat him up. He got there, he was in a stretcher, there's a bunch of commotion, they're putting a needle in his arm. Of course he's upset, it's his son. He didn't know what happened, he only had one version of the facts, and that was from Katie Cashman. But who cares if he was agitated? He wasn't even at the bar that night, before or after. He was actually across the street. He complied, he cooperated. Well, it doesn't matter if there's personality conflicts. There's no drinking. These patrons didn't even drink. No one was overserved. No underage people were served. This shouldn't be a liquor code hearing at all. So again, I'd ask the authority to focus on what is relevant and what is not relevant. And again, I'm curious to see what's going to happen in the criminal case, and that case is going to play itself out. But for a liquor code violation, there simply wasn't one. Nothing was foreseeable to my client. None of this was foreseeable. He had no reason to think it was going to go on. Of course, he didn't want it to go on. And of course, he's not upset that it went on. And he fired his own son that night, even thinking that maybe what Katie was saying was true or not. On the spot, that night, Peter was fired. He's never been employed there. He's never drank there. He's never hung out there except for going in the kitchen door to see his father from that day till now. That's what my client, the licensee, did. So again, we have to blame, if you're going to blame someone, don't blame the person that had nothing to do with it. My secretary shoots someone, I don't think they're coming after my bar license. And on the same logic, I'd ask you not to come after Mr. Franginkakis' liquor license. This is a brewery. If we take away his liquor license, this is his livelihood, this is his business. He's been a long time. He said he's been in the restaurant business for 39 years. He's had multiple liquor licenses in multiple jurisdictions. Taking away this would be taking away his livelihood for something he had no control over, was unforeseeable to him, and he had nothing to do with. Again, I'd ask the authority to follow the law and judge the facts and not find that any violation has occurred.
The role of the authority is to apply the facts of the law. In the council communication, you have the law. Most notably, any employee or agent of such licensee shall conduct the licensed premise in a decent and orderly and respectable manner. I'm going to skip down. Nor shall the licensee, his employee, or agent knowingly permit any activity or acts of disorderly conduct as defined by 18.9 and 106. That's the law. Having a license within the city of Littleton is not a right, it's a privilege. And with that privilege comes responsibility. That responsibility is on the shoulders of the licensee, that responsibility is also on the shoulders of employees and agents that are within that establishment. Licensee wants to argue what you've heard has nothing to do with a liquor code violation. It has everything to do with a crime. This liquor violation does have everything to do with the crimes that you've heard. Absolutely. We're not talking about a secretary. We're talking about the son of the owner who is clearly, they've admitted he's a manager. I would submit to you it's likely more than that. And I think what Peter does believe and what he says is very important. His criminal actions have everything to do with the law that's in front of you. Those actions of disorderly conduct that are committed by Peter to Rebecca, to the patrons, to the police officers. Licensee wants to say, don't pick on Vasilios. Well, let's talk about Vasilios. Let's talk about what he did. I don't buy his version of events, what he presented to you tonight. Let's talk about the version of events as presented by the officers. He was yelling. He was impeding. They had to assign an officer to him. Now, I get it. He may have been upset that his son was in the ambulance, was getting treated. But he is still a business owner, and he has a duty and obligation under this license to conduct himself accordingly, to conduct himself in a manner that is befitting of his position in Littleton. Everything you've heard is important. All the evidence of the crimes is important. Crimes were committed in the licensee's operation of his business. Vasilios himself, according to the officers, at a minimum was disturbing the peace and acting disorderly. That's 5 examples of where the licensee, his agents, or employees fell down. It is very important. And my question to you is this what we want in the city of Littleton? Do we want an establishment that is not, we basically can't send our officers out there. You heard Commander Hyman, he can't send a single officer out there. And at this point, I'm not sure it's safe to send any officers out there. Licensee argues Peter was fired immediately. He was fired and his son did nothing wrong according to his testimony tonight. He was fired, but yet will probably be allowed to come into the kitchen, which, mind you, is part of the licensed premises. The city's proven this case. The crimes have everything to do with what you are required to find here under conduct and establishment, and I'd ask you to find that we've done so.
Licensee care to respond?
Oh, I didn't think I got to respond.
I would object. I get the final word. It's my burden.
Yeah, that's usually how it works is close, rebuttal, close. I usually don't get to get up again.
This time it's the responsibility for the authority to determine whether there is a violation. And if anyone feels that way, we have to have a motion and have it approved by the authority. Before that, we need to have a discussion of what we've just heard. And
Mr. Chairman, I believe we've been presented with a prima facie case of violation of the Littleton Liquor Authority Code, Liquor Code, and I'm going to tick through my presentment of facts because I'm the alternate. I'm not allowed to make a motion, but if I were allowed to make a motion, these are the facts that I would present. First of all, referring to Littleton City Code 3-2-11, paragraph 2, paragraph A, conduct in establishments. And I'm just going to go back and forth and read this Counselor, you should pay attention to this. Each licensee and employee, Peter is clearly an employee, shall conduct his business in a decent, orderly, and responsible manner, not permit within or upon the licensed premises the loitering of habitual drunkards or intoxicated persons. Peter was intoxicated. Lewd or indecent displays. He was yelling. He started a fight. He used profanity. He was screaming. He used profanity as outlined in several different instances. Rowdiness. Moving further on through the paragraph, shall immediately report to the city's police department any unlawful or disorderly act or conduct. He did not report it to the police. In fact, he impeded reporting to the police. When the police did arrive, he resisted a lawful order. He resisted arrest. He created assault upon a police officer. And then, while being treated, added threats to police and fire personnel. Although those, I think, are covered within 3-2-11 and then going on to Regulation 47-900A, all of those are covered in here. Respectable manner, intoxication, not permit any activity or acts of disorderly conduct. All those are Peter's violations. I think those go to the fact that a violation has occurred. Moreover, the licensee has a role here as well. Bill allowed Peter on the establishment and empowered him. Empowered him so much that Peter thought that he could remonstrate an employee and then create a situation that led to a fight with customers. Bill arrived on scene. He was disruptive, antagonistic. That's not a professional manner. He resents Commander Iger. Tonight, he made allegations against the police department. That's not the professional atmosphere of a person who's received the privilege of operating inside the city of Littleton. I don't believe we can trust his judgment. I don't think that we can be assured that he will assume the responsibilities of a licensee. Licensing in Littleton is a privilege, not a right, and I believe he has forfeited that privilege. If I were allowed to make a motion, those would be my arguments.
Any other comments?
I was surprised the licensee's close was that this had nothing to do with the licensee. To the extent, that we did hear evidence from both sides, actually, witnesses on both sides, that an employee of the licensee acted in what I think an average citizen, which is the criteria, would see as indecent and a non-respectable manner. The manager in charge that night, who was in charge of the employee, said that she didn't think that it was something she'd like her customers to see. I think that obviously the fact that you had a customer get up and have to get involved indicates that it offended the sensibilities of the average citizen. I think those facts alone, I was very surprised to hear that the licensee indicated that none of what we heard over the last two hearings had anything to do with the licensee. I think that the criminal facts in a case do have something to do with the licensee as to whether or not there was criminal conduct in a licensee. And I think that there are very troubling facts that we heard over the last couple of nights. But at the very least, I don't think that the licensee, through the licensee's employee, conducted the premises in a decent, orderly, and respectable manner. I think that's at the very base. And I think from there, we heard a lot of evidence about other actions as well.
express my concern for the fact that there was a manager on site and these activities did happen, and the general manager on site did not control the situation, did not confront the employee who was rowdy and loud and all the other things we talked about. I think the licensee who hires an employee and appoints that employee to be in charge of his business when he's not there has to rely on that employee to do their job, which primarily is to see that the laws are not violated. That manager did not do that. And the fact that really troubles me is that a customer was more concerned with the conduct of this employee than the general manager was. And this customer took it upon himself to confront the employee, which he had no obligation to do, but he was concerned. And he was so concerned that he had to call the police department. To me, that is a violation of the codes that we discussed.
And I have to agree with Bill with the chairman on that one. I also found it very disturbing that a patron felt that he had to step in and possibly protect a woman, and that the general manager didn't take control of the situation. And on several instances, we've been told time and time again, Peter was intoxicated. And I would say that, yes, he is in violation of the conduct in establishments.
Mr. Chairman, I have no comments at this time.
I agree with what I've heard my fellow members of the authority have to say. One of the things that is disturbing to me again is that there was a general manager on premises and was oblivious to everything going on, other than at the end of the day, when we arrive here, we hear from that manager that nothing was really wrong. Peter was not intoxicated. Every single officer, including the officer trained in instructing the police in recognizing the signs of intoxication for DUI, etc. Witnessed this, the paramedics. It was every single officer, every single paramedic that said Peter was intoxicated. But Ms. Cashman says no. She didn't recognize any of the signs. And if the owner has a general manager for over a year that is either not telling the truth or cannot recognize the signs of intoxication in the employee, again, once goes to the owner as the licensee. I'm disturbed by the comments that just the police are liars. Now, in this country, in a number of places, we are sadly having problems with various police departments. Saddens most Americans. The city of Littleton has a challenge in hiring police officers. When they wish to hire an officer, it takes them a long time because the bar is high. I say this from my experience on ride-along with officers and having attended the Littleton Citizens Police Academy. And one of the things that was emphasized in a problem in getting officers, they want officers, when they get on a stand in the courtroom, to tell the truth, not say what's convenient or works out well for them. And there is many an excellent candidate that has come before the Littleton City Police Department that has just been turned down because the department is not firm in its conviction that that individual will consistently not yield to temptation and fudge a little. So for me to believe that all of these officers and the paramedics in the city of Littleton, which from my experience is one of the finest police departments in the state, I just cannot accept that Peter was not intoxicated, and for whatever reason, the general manager did not do her duty in calling the police and is either not telling the truth or could not recognize the signs of intoxication in Peter. And that is the licensee's primary agent on premises that night. The law is clear.
Mr.
Everyone's
Chairman,
had a chance to speak. Is there a motion?
can I make a suggestion due to the late hour that the authority just consider a motion about whether there was a violation or not, and if there is a violation, that we reconvene at the next regular scheduled meeting to hear aggravating and mitigating factors and the sanctions to be imposed?
I'd intended to do that, so
Okay.
I agree with you.
I'll make a motion. Based on the foregoing evidence and testimony, I move that the licensing authority find that Vasilios Frangiskakis, doing business as Old Mill Brewery, 5798 South Rapp Street, did violate Littleton City Code, Section 3211A2, and Regulation 47900A, and that the hearing be continued to the regular meeting of the licensing authority on Wednesday, February 11th, 2015 at 7 p.m. to determine the sanctions to be imposed.
I will second that.
Discussion? We're ready for a vote. Will the city clerk poll the authority, please?
Chairman Bradish?
Yes.
Vice Chair Cole?
Yes.
Authority Member Levere?
Yes.
Authority Member Mather?
Yes.
Authority Member Odell?
Yes.
Motion is carried. This hearing will continue on February the 11th at 7 p.m., at which time we'll discuss penalties and items of mitigation and aggravation. There being no further business, this hearing is closed.